Good evening, everybody. This is going to be a video that was inspired by a Jonathan Haidt video that I just watched today. I will try and get a link to it in the description. See if I can do that here. I've talked about Haidt before. I think he's one of the outstanding thinkers of today. I don't agree with him on everything, but he has some very, very salient points documenting some of the changes that have happened in our society, and as well as outlining some solutions to some of those problems. Let's see if I can get a yes. And it also relates to some of the stuff that was talked about in yesterday's live stream. So it's not a secret that communal showers are one of the topics that I find just kind of very fascinating. And one of the people in yesterday's live stream brought up that he had just seen my video on the topic, my second video. I've made two. One was a couple years ago and one was earlier this year. And I feel like Haidt's work is quite salient on that point, although he never addresses it directly. And then there was another point brought up last night, and I want to tie all these together, but the idea of, like, what about the individual and collectivism? I think some people are maybe a little bit confused or don't understand, and I don't blame them, between the fact that I'm a libertarian and a methodological individualist and very much into personal liberty and all that. How could I be into something like communal showers when they are not about that, right? That seems to be like a socialistic or a collectivistic activity, at least, and so how can I reconcile those two? And I would like to do that because I think it's certainly worth doing, and it's a stand-in for a whole bunch of other topics. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and put the link. I'm going to put the link in the description to the Jonathan Haidt video I watched. It's a lecture he gave relatively recently. It's a good lecture, though. Let's see. It's very hard for me to talk and type at the same time. I'm just not that much of a multitasker. They say President Hoover could write Latin and Greek at the same time with different hands, and I just can't believe that's possible. Alright, hopefully this will get the title up. Boom. Alright, hopefully this will get the title up. And there it goes. Boom. Perfect. Well, not perfect, but alright, should be up now. So this is kind of a to go with a more general topic here, because one of the commenters was like, hey, what's the big deal? I like to be private. I don't see the point in me taking a communal shower. It bothers me. It makes me upset. I'm uncomfortable with it. Why is this something that I should consider doing? And I think there's more than one answer to that. But then there was also this kind of idea of, well, wait a second. You're a libertarian. You believe in individual rights. Why would you be so interested in pushing a collective activity like this? And I think that goes back to, there's nothing about libertarianism that mandates, anyway, that people become radical individuals. Yeah, I like communal showers too. If it was showering with the gender I'm attracted to. Well, in common knowledge, I don't deny for 1 second that that is not an element in my interest in the topic. I never have. I've always said in the videos that's a part of it for me. But it's actually true for a lot of straight guys. On yesterday's video, one of the commenters was saying he was straight, but he missed doing it with his teammates, and it was something that he really valued. And that's a perspective that a lot of people have. There's a platonic value to it, in addition to any homoerotic value. And I will actually say, in general, most gay guys today, they're going to skew more with their younger generation than the fact that they're gay, and so they're more likely to be shy about it than they are to be into it. It's a space of great insecurity for them, not a space of like homoerotic opportunity. And it's not really a space for homoerotic opportunity even for me. I mean, yes, there's eye candy, but it's not something that you are actively engaged in doing anything, at least not typically. So but there's this idea like a lot of non-libertarians, and I would say of all species, whether they're conservatives, whether they're socialists, whether they're democratic socialists, whether they're communists, liberals, everything, they all have this kind of, I think it's fair to say, more or less a straw man to say, hey, humans are social animals. Humans are not isolated individuals who never meet or only meet to mate or whatever. We form social groups. We always have. The structure of those groups have changed, right? If you go back 100,000 years or 50,000 years, you're looking at hunter-gatherer groups, but they would still be groups. And and now it's certainly the case that we form very large societies with thousands or millions or even billions of members. In fact, you could say that there's a global society, at least nominally. And so they will critique libertarians and say, well, your philosophy is clearly anti-human or unnatural, or there's something about it that is clearly wrong because you just keep talking about the individual and all that. And then they'll make a very logical leap to go that since humans are social animals, whatever political philosophy I happen to believe in is therefore justified. So this argument will be used by Thomas Hobbes to validate absolute monarchy, but it'll be used by Democrats. It will be used by someone like Alcibiades or Julius Caesar. It could be used by the Tsar. It could be used by Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin or Bernie Sanders or pretty much anyone, right? There's this huge leap from humans are social animals to whatever politics I have are therefore validated. So that second part, as I've just said, there's a huge logical leap. You know, if all you're going to say is that any society where people work together in some fashion is justified, then that justifies every society, because there aren't any societies where that's not the case. So slavery would definitely count, right? Slavery is still a social organization. You have slaves, they're human beings. There's a hierarchy, whatever. There's nothing in the nature of humans that necessarily makes that wrong if you're just going to say humans are social animals. So I think that that's a huge. I mean, people think that argument is such a cut and dry argument, and it's really not, because you have to make, what social organization is the most optimal or the least bad, and just saying, well, we're social animals doesn't get you anywhere as far as that concerns. But the other thing is that it's a straw man. Libertarians don't say that we all need to become hermits or that we need to live on our own or that every single person, right? In fact, given how obsessed almost all libertarians are with economics, and the fact that the study of economics is how people interact when they have a division of labor, when they have differential skills, how they can work together to better achieve their ends. There isn't necessarily a normative function to economics, but that is the overwhelming normative bent among libertarians and economists, is how do people get along? How do they, in what ways do they cooperate with the most mutual benefit or the most individual benefit, or both? Again, there may be some philosophers out there, though I'm not sure that they would all carry the title libertarian, who believe in people going off and being total hermits. And of course, there are libertarians who think that you ought to be able to do that if you want, but there aren't any, or very few anyway, none that I'm familiar with. Even people like Henry David Thoreau, who would say you should do that, you need to do that, or that's a mandate. I think everyone acknowledges that we are social animals, but it's very important to ask the question: how should we organize? How should we socialize? How should we interact? What is the basis of our cooperation? Is it based on coercion? Is it based on democracy? Is it based on authority? What is the function of that authority? Is that authority based? Is it parental authority? Is it democratic authority? Is it arbitrary authority? Is it authority based on skill? Is it authority based on merit? Is it religious authority? There's thousands of questions that kind of can be derived from that. And of course, libertarians are going to, you could say it kind of breaks down to, they think that they're either utilitarian or deontological reasons, or both, that make the best interactions are going to be those that are the most voluntary, that have the least coercion. So two people agreeing to work, right? Someone saying, I will offer you a job at a certain wage, and they negotiate and agree to it. We would say that that's probably a better arrangement than where there is a unilateral negotiation and one side just tells the other side, this is what you're going to do and this is what I will pay you in return, and that there's no ability to deny that claim or to negotiate a different one. So something more like slavery. And so, we want stuff to be voluntary, and we want stuff to the value. We don't want a universalized value necessarily, because we question that there is such a thing. So again, it's people have methodological individualism is a very important method to kind of break down society, because the individual is the primary unit of society. The other units of society are much more nebulous and uh, harder to define, and in fact, quite um, what's the term? I always forget this term. Um, they're they're abstract, right? So you can define lots of different collectives, right? You can call it the nation, you can call it the religion, you can call it the race, you can call it the ethnicity, you can call it the culture. There's all kinds of different things you can go, and you can draw all kinds of different circles, and you can kind of arrive at any conclusion that you want by gerrymandering what collective unit you're referring to. This is a big problem with collectivism, actually, because if we define the collective a certain way and include a certain number of members, whether or not we're relying on democracy, we can engineer any kind of thing that we want. So if we just say, well, the collective is just women, then that can allow us to reach radically different conclusions if we say, well, the collective is some amalgamation of half men and half women, or everyone on this particular island, or everyone on this particular continent, or whatnot. So methodological individualism is very important, and I think the best basis to go forward in kind of social sciences. So to get into the communal showering thing, um, we do want to socialize, and we want to socialize voluntarily. So, to be clear, I find this debate a little awkward because I don't believe in public schools. I think public schools have been a huge mistake. I think that the reasons people believe they exist are very different from the reasons they actually exist. People kind of pretend, or they talk like they are a kind of welfare, that it's the state providing educational services to people who probably can't afford them. Obviously richer people or middle class people are probably able to educate their own children or pay for them to be educated. There's not many people who dispute that. But there's this argument that, well, some people who are poor, or maybe their parents don't value education even if they have the means to do it, so schools should be available for them. Now, that's a great argument for welfare schools for people who can pay. That's not such a great argument for mandating that everyone go to school compulsory. And at the time, that was actually quite a debate. When public schools were implemented, they weren't initially made to be compulsory. They were made to be publicly financed welfare schools, basically charity schools run by, say, the state of Massachusetts or the city of Boston or a church or whatnot. And then there was a gradual spread of compulsory education. And actually, Murray Rothbard has a great essay kind of outlining the history of that, as do writers like John Taylor Gatto. But that reveals that the true purpose of education is not to provide a service to those who can't afford it, but to implement socializing, top-down socializing from whoever controls the educational apparatus, right? And there hasn't been a uniform uh, goal in this. So the original public schools were much more intended to spread certain religious ideas or to suppress certain religious ideas, especially Catholics. This idea that many Protestants were very, very anti-Catholic, and Catholics kind of had a tradition of having their own schools and teaching their children to believe in Catholicism. And this was very, very much resented by the WASP elites of New England, who sought to destroy this by having compulsory public education that would teach them not to believe in the Pope. But a little bit later, you got more nationalistic ideas. We're going to have immigrants who have come here, or first, second generation people who are Italians or Irish or Polish or whatever, and they're not good Americans, and so we are going to use the public school system to, quote, create good citizens, however defined. And then, of course, you had nonprofit organizations run by big industrialists who looked at it as, well, we want to train, quote, good workers. And these influences, they're all there. They don't all have hegemony at the same time, and they don't all express themselves in the same way or in the same vehemence. But the tool of the education system is there for those who want it. I think now it's closer to say that it is in the hands of people who want to wage a culture war through the school system, and by the government that wants to portray itself in the most positive possible light, which it does through its textbooks, through its teachers from the curriculum, and communal showers kind of have a role in that. I've gone through the history plenty of other times before, but it's interesting because there's a nominal reason to do it, and then there are other reasons that are not explicitly given, but that are nonetheless often there. The nominal reason is just purely hygienic. If the first communal showers in the United States were in the Boston public school system started in 1900 or 1901. So we're going on 120 years almost on that history. And then it was very much, hey, a lot of people do not have indoor plumbing. A lot of these students may not be in a position where they can regularly bathe. Having facilities for them at school where they're mandated to attend. I think most states were mandating students attend school by 1910 or 1915. Massachusetts was a little bit early, but it's basically the late 19th century, early 20th century, that this was a good opportunity to do this. And then, of course, if you did any activities at school that would get you dirty or sweaty or unhygienic, whether it would be gym or any kind of sport, it was a good opportunity for that as well. Perfectly reasonable to say, hey, you just played gym, you're very sweaty, you're very dirty, and you're going to go to math class right now. It's not a good idea. And part of it's just being clean and not smelling bad, but another part of it is it might literally be hygienic. Fears of spreading pathogens or whatnot. And then there's kind of in parallel with this, you have the whole growth of indoor pools, which really took off in the late 19th century. And keeping them clean turned out to be, and it kind of still is, quite an engineering challenge. Pools tended to become very rancid. Until the 1920s, they had not really figured out how chlorine could work. People knew that it had antibacterial, antipathogen properties, but if the dosage of chlorine is too high, it's dangerous for humans, and if it's too low, it's not effective at doing its job. So the first pools were just regular water, and they would become quite dirty quite quickly. But you could extend their lives by several days if you did a couple things, and those things included requiring everybody who used them to shower before they use them, to shower naked especially, and that they then swim naked. If you can just imagine, if you have a pool at a YMCA or a gym or a school that it opens up on Monday, and all the children come in, and that weekend the children swam in all the local bodies of water, the various lakes, rivers, oceans, other pools, whatnot. If they were to wear their swimsuits and jump into the pool, they would probably bring pathogens and parasites from every adjoining body of water that they had touched, and then concentrate them all into a single pool. So it was found that if they did not allow this, if they made the students go swim naked, so they would divide it by gender, boys and girls at different times typically. Although I think maybe at certain ages, if they were super young, they may not have cared. And there's some interesting photographic evidence of that who could be who's it socially acceptable to be naked from is kind of shifted downwards on the sexes over the course of the late 19th and earliest 20th century. But you have the situation where if everybody does that, if they shower before they go, the pool will last much longer. Instead of needing to be drained in 3 or 4 days, it might last a week. And later, when they developed chlorine again in the 20s, and to have chlorine work, you have to have the temperature right and the salinity right, and the chemistry has to be correct, and then of course the dosage of chlorine has to be correct. So it wasn't a simple task. There's actually a decent amount of chemistry involved in it, especially when you're dealing with an environment where you don't have complete control. Right? There's people jumping in, there's people coming in, new water, filtered water, whatnot. And so this really did help with the pathogens, but only to an extent. Okay, you still don't want fecal matter in a pool, even if you do have chlorine in it. And the other problem was that wool and cotton swimming suits, which is what they were made out of in the 1920s all the way up until the 1970s and 80s, would break down in chlorine. And not that these institutions would mind that your suit would get ruined, not necessarily in a single swim, but progressively. But they did mind the fibers of of the cotton and the wool getting into the filtration systems and wrecking the pools. And so I found that it was quite typical, especially for men, for pools to require you to swim naked. And this was totally logistic, as was showering at school, either after gym, after sports, or just for kids who were dirty. But you find fairly early on, and I found reports of this as early as the 30s, and there may have been other ones that I just haven't found because it's not well documented, but people started citing ancillary benefits. That there was in a certain way, the whole process was very egalitarian, that you have these different kids who are coming from different social economic backgrounds. They might be immigrants, they might not be immigrants, they might be they might be rich, they might have political power or not political power, but you put them in a situation and they're all naked together. And obviously, not all people are the same. Right? Physically, people differ in almost every way that you can measure. But the accoutrements of class, the accoutrements of society, of wealth, those would be shut away primarily. I mean, you could always say the wealthy student, maybe they have better teeth. And to intersect another topic, there is maybe this connection between being circumcised and being wealthy, and being uncircumcised and being poor, which was never really explicit. It was kind of implicit, though, in a lot of U.S. society during this period. But no, there was a certain egalitarianism there, and you can find it. I've cited it before. I might try and find the link. But Time Life magazine during the Great Depression had a series called Democracy in America, and it actually showed a picture of a high school shower scene filled with naked guys, naked teenagers. Now they angled it right so you could see their butts but not their penises. But the heading was, Democracy in America, and I was like, look, we're all equal. Whatever our differences, whatever are the disparities that exist within society, this is a reminder that we're all just men. We're all just human beings at one level, and that the poorest guy in the class can see the richest guy in the class and see that maybe he has a small penis, or maybe he has love handles, or he's got a funny mole, or whatever it is, and that there's a certain social cohesion and intimacy there. And athletic teams apparently understood this pretty well, and it's anecdotally commented on very often by coaches that they want their teams to shower together because it makes the teams play better together, and it makes them a better unit. And one of the commenters last night was repeating that over and over again. And it's something that I've heard repeated many, many times. And I've observed it, with my own life and with others. When they start showering together, they just get a lot closer. There's just something about it that's very intimate. Again, this isn't sexual. They're not having an orgy. They're not having fun with each other, at least not typically. I mean, that can happen as well, but it's not the norm. Even when that doesn't happen, you're still going to have a lot of integration that's happening in that situation. And a lot of people find it very valuable. In fact, a lot of people miss it when it goes away. So there's that element. But I want to draw, then there was another one. It was considered like a rite of passage, and it was understood that most people, if you're talking by the mid 20th century, many students were uncomfortable with the idea of showering naked. Right? They grew up with a certain expectation of privacy, and this is something that slowly changed. And again, if you go back into the 19th century, if you were to go swimming, swimsuits weren't a thing. Nudity in those contexts was pretty common, and that continued on up. And you get to the point where like public nudity becomes less and less acceptable. The age that public nudity is acceptable goes down and down. Even today, communal showers are all fun and games until Jerry Sandusky shows up. Right, but that's a funny joke, but like that's a kind of a weird situation because he's the coach, he's in charge of the whole facility, and he's bringing in like 8-year-olds, right? So that's not like a team showering, that's not like a group of people, and he's getting them in small groups. It's harder to do to a whole group of people. And I will say also, as a gay guy, I have hooked up in gyms before, and I've messed around in gyms, but I've never messed around in a communal shower because it's just too open. If you have a stall with a curtain, you can close the curtain and you can do just about everything. You can have sex, you can have oral, mess around, make out, anything. You turn on the water, no one can hear, and if the drapes go down to the bottom, or if they're angled right, you can get away with anything. In a communal shower, you can't. So, the other problem with Jerry Sandusky is that the other people there were all aware of it and did nothing and said nothing. Or when they did say something, the police just said, it's fine, and they let him go. So, also, not to harp on that, but that didn't come out until 20 years after communal showering had basically already ended. So the idea that that was the cause is just not it. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. You're just making a joke, Mr. Thompson. But that is not a very good explanation of what happened. So you have this belief, though, that, hey, this is where I want to draw it into Jonathan Haidt. A lot of people are very nervous about this. It's something that a lot of people looked at with great trepidation, that they were very concerned about, that they were afraid to do. They don't want to be seen naked. And I of course can say personally that that's how I felt. I was not eager. I was literally petrified of this happening. I did everything in my power to avoid it. When I would take swimming lessons, when I would go to birthday parties that were at pools, at summer camp, whenever it was, I would just do everything in my power to avoid ever being seen naked because it just terrified me. And I couldn't really explain why. It wasn't like I had had a bad or negative experience that then traumatized me for life. Just the whole concept of it really made me nervous. And what you had a lot of administrators saying, a lot of coaches and gym teachers saying is, this is a good way for people to get over those fears, to get over uh, I'll get to that in a second, Mr. Jackson. Like, this will be a good way for people to get over their trepidation and their self-consciousness. And I think that that's to a large extent true. And this is even more important now because we have. I never knew you were gay. It wasn't a. It was not a. Not a mystery. It wasn't a secret. Um, Zyklon butterfly. Huh. Interesting name. So uh, this was, I'll write a passage, but also for a way to build character. And what Jonathan Haidt says is one of the great um, mis, one of the great wisdoms of the past. His first book was about like the lost wisdom of the ancients. Was basically summarized by Nietzsche in whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That humans, as um, uh, the author of Black Swan, what is the name? Nasha Taleb said was humans are anti-fragile, right? That exposing yourself, like your bone structure gets stronger, your muscles get stronger if you expose them to stress, your immune system gets stronger if you're exposed to pathogens, as long as you don't die, right? There's obviously a threshold beyond which this is not true. Whatever kills you doesn't make you stronger, you'll be dead. But whatever doesn't kill you does make you stronger, within reason. And being put into a situation where you're uncomfortable, where you're nervous, where you feel exposed, and then becoming comfortable with that is a really good way uh, to overcome that. And what we have now is people who are becoming increasingly more private, increasingly more isolated, being bombarded with imagery, whether it be on Instagram or on Reddit or on YouTube or in advertising or marketing or on wherever, Snapchat, of highly idealized, not necessarily unreasonable, but unrepresentative body type images. Right. So the people that you see typically, some of them are, I mean, there's a spectrum here. Some of them are clearly they are, uh, uh, have amazing genetics and are on steroids and whatnot, and have body types that the average person can't achieve. But many of them do have achievable body types, but it's not very easy to achieve, and most people never do. And yet, if that is all you see, if that's all you're consumed by, then your image of yourself and how you stack up relative to other people is going to be greatly skewed. You're going to think that everybody out there has 10% body fat and a six pack and broad shoulders and whatever, and that's just not the case. And exposing yourself and being exposed to others in a cross section of actual humanity is going to be a great palliative for that. You'll see, there's a perspective uh, that gives you a much better perspective on reality. Uh, so the other thing is, children always kind of complained about this, but their gym teachers would say, just grow up, get over it, you'll be fine. And the vast majority of them did. You might always find examples who didn't, but the vast majority of them did, and they were better for it. Now what happened by the 90s is adults began becoming reluctant to make children uncomfortable, right? If children said, I don't want to do this, I'm nervous about doing this, the adults started to cave more and more and say, okay, fine. Now, it is true, I want a body like Hugh Jackman and Wolverine, I'd be very satisfied. You want to be old? You can look at Hugh Jackman's body type from the first X-Men to Logan, just went through a radical transformation. He basically was just average in the first Wolverine movie, and at the end he was clearly roided out of his mind. But and you also want the claws, or in the adamantium skeleton, or just the muscle tone and the body fat percentage. I might be wrong, but Length Cleaner may have made a video about the origin of gay lisps, but I'm not sure. He's made videos on accents before. I've never made a video on gay lisps, and I don't know where they come from or what the deal is. Shut up. It's my channel. I can say what I want. Have you ever read A Libertarian Interpret or Render Unto Caesar Part of the Bible? I've heard it discussed quite a bit. The one time I heard it live, Joe Silverman, who was an anarcho-capitalist but a Catholic, I heard him talk about it once, and I've heard others take a similar line. And basically, they just render it as it's a private property thing. If Caesar owns a coin, that's Caesar's coin, then you should give Caesar his coin. That doesn't mean that all states are legitimate no matter what they do. And some people have interpreted it says give Caesar what belongs to Caesar, what's legitimately his. That doesn't say give Caesar whatever Caesar wants, or that Caesar has the right to tell you everything and you must obey. So I would say that falls within the realm of interpretation, and that to just draw from that automatic subservience to the state, I think it is an interpretation you can make, but you can make other interpretations and ones that aren't any more valid or any less valid. Render unto Obama what is Obama's. That isn't what I was talking about. That's exactly what you asked, though, or did I miss something? So, but yeah, so we got to a point where students and or teachers and administrators and parents were not willing to force children to do something they felt uncomfortable by. But we have to have the question: what is so terrible about this that children should avoid it? And the idea that they're automatically going to get raped by Jerry Sandusky is just not realistic. Um, yes, sexual abuse can happen and does happen, but you have to put in what are the odds of it happening. You have to weigh that, and of course, there's other things you can do to prevent it other than just saying we shan't have any communal showering. I don't think that communal showering is particularly more risky than anything else for that matter. What is legal tender is indeed property of the state. No, I don't know. There's people who go either way on this. The state tends not to view its fiduciary media as its property. Right, it belongs to the person who owns it. But I'm not sure. I could be wrong about that. You should have another chat with Ivan the Heathen. I'd love to. He actually watched one of my first live streams. I don't know if he's watched any since. And he's also, I think he's a little burned out on just he doesn't want to remake the same points over and over and over again. But the stuff that was happening, I don't want to speak for him either, but the stuff that was happening with the left and with the regulation of Facebook, I know he was quite annoyed by that. So if you think I should have a talk with him, you should tell him that he should have a talk with me. Do you think that compulsory barbell training would be as valuable for everyone as communal showers, putting aside the morality of compulsory schools? Yes. I think that, like, I don't believe in objective pedagogies that are best for everybody because people have different goals and different abilities. But I do believe that there are certain pedagogies that would be very good for most people in most circumstances. So if you're talking about any kind of physical fitness, I think I'm going to fall very much in line with the likes of Mark Ripito on this, that developing strength with resistance training, and especially with barbell training, is one of the best things that you can do for your health overall. But I think it's better than running. Walking is very, very healthy also, but that's not something you need to take a class for. So no. I think squats and deadlifts and presses, overhead press are all great things that I highly recommend people do. And this is the other thing. I don't like to make the logical leap from I think this would be good for you to you should be forced to do this, right? I want to persuade people, and I don't think people should be forced to take communal showers. And I know that a lot of you think that it's a weird thing and you don't want to do it. And I'm not talking about forcing anyone to do it. I am saying that it is something that many people would benefit from, and that it would be good for them to do, and that's the other thing Haidt was talking about. I forget what it was called, CPD. But basically, the way when you have somebody who refuses to do something, but they can't really express a reason why that really stands up to scrutiny, right? So it's one thing to say, I don't want to ride a motorcycle because I've looked at the stats and the chances that I die are, or get an injury are decently high, or I don't want to skydive for that reason or whatnot. Yeah, they kind of have an argument, but what's the argument with communal showering? You don't want to be seen naked. What's the problem with you being seen naked? Why is that such a horrible, terrible thing? That's not going to kill you. That's not going to. I mean, you could say, well, I could get raped, but what are the odds that you're going to get raped? Right? This is the same people who say they won't go to a gun range because they don't want to get killed by accident. And when you look at the odds of that happening, they're so infinitesimal, or they approach zero so closely that that's not a valid reason, really. Uh, yeah, don't skip leg day. Barbell squats are probably the number one exercise that people can do if you could only pick one. I never really cared about communal showers. Yeah. There's a joke in there, but I'm not going to say it because of YouTube's algorithms. Carnivore diet. I'm not on it. Uh, because we have the right to draw the line at our bodies. Of course, you have the right to draw the line at your bodies. Of course. Nobody should force you to communal shower. That's not a good argument not to do it, though. Right? I mean, no one should be able to force you to lift weights, right? I don't think that you should be forced to lift weights, but that doesn't mean lifting weights wouldn't be good for you. So there's this, I feel like that's being a little bit pedantic here. If somebody says, hey, this is something that is potentially beneficial for you, and then you just say, well, I have the right to not do it, so I'm not going to do it, that's not a good reason not to do it. Bullying can happen, but it's not that common. Like, just say that it's hypothetically possible, and therefore you're not going to do it, is not a compelling reason. Like, bullying could happen in any scenario, right? You can get bullied at work. You can get bullied at the gym, right? Even if you don't use the showers, you could get bullied there. It's possible. It's not very likely, but it's possible. The idea that you're going to get bullied in the communal showers is basically like a plot line from a teen drama, but not something that's statistically borne out. Big fear people have, but it's an irrational fear. Again, you have the right not to work out, and no, I'm not. You shouldn't be forced to work out, and you shouldn't be forced to go onto a diet, right? We can have people are debating the carnivore diet, the vegan diet. Whatever the pros and cons are, it's your body. You have the right to decide what diet you want to eat. But if someone makes a compelling argument, hey, this is a good diet for you to try, sure, you should consider doing it. You shouldn't just say, nope, it's my body, so I've decided I'm not going to do it, or it has no value. Um, yeah, going out of my house results in me bullying, so I'm not going out of my house. That's very the seafood diet. You see food and you eat it. So, and this is kind of a telltale sign. And Haidt talks about it. I put a link in the description of a recent Jonathan Haidt talk on this. And when he gets to the part about children, because right now, of course, the millennials, the Gen Z people, not the millennials, the Gen Z people, the iGen people, they are terrified of speech, right? They don't like hearing certain words. They don't like hearing certain ideas. It triggers them. It makes them feel really upset. And they would say, I have a right not to be upset. I have a right not to be offended. I find this, I feel Milo Yiannopoulos marginalizes me or whatever. And basically, they need to grow a pair. Like, they just need to shut up and get over it because it's not that big a deal. And being exposed to good other ideas, even if they're bad ideas, is good for you. And getting fucking naked with other guys and taking a shower is not going to kill you. It's not that bad for you. And in fact, it's beneficial, right? You're going to develop character as a result of that. Especially now, that's not true if you already do it, right? I already do it. It doesn't bother me. I'm fine. I don't need to keep doing it. I'm good. But if you are terrified of doing it, if you will argue and argue until you're blue in the face of reasons why, no, you don't have to do a communal shower. I'm saying that you should. That it's a good idea. And people are retorting, I have the right not to do it, so I'm not going to do it, so it's a bad idea. Right? This live stream needs a trigger warning. So, again, if you find yourself arguing constantly why you're not going to do something, but there isn't really a good reason not to do it, which there isn't, right? Hypothetically, you could be bullied. Hypothetically, you could be made fun of. Hypothetically, you could be embarrassed. All that's hypothetically possible. It's not particularly likely. Communal showering can do more good than harm. It can build confidence and pride in themselves. It helps young men understand the varying time clocks of adolescent growth. It becomes natural. Absolutely true. You get a much better perspective on the life cycle of men. Right? This is especially if you're showering with different age groups, so you can see what a young fit man looks like. You can see what a middle-aged man looks like. You can see what an old man looks like, and it just gives you this perspective that you're not going to get otherwise. I'm triggering your shower PTSD. The way to get over PTSD, the way to get over a phobia is through exposure, gradual exposure, right? So, Height would probably say it would be wrong if we were trying to cure you of your shower phobia. It would be wrong if we grabbed you, ripped you naked, and threw you in the showers, with a whole bunch of strangers. But let's say, okay, we go, we work out together. We'll go, and maybe you'll wear your swimsuit a couple times. You'll wear your swimsuit, shower, and then slowly, let it down a little bit lower, a little bit lower. Maybe one day when there's not many people around, you actually go naked, and maybe, you don't see anybody, or maybe you see one person or whatever, and eventually you get to the point where it's not a big deal, and you're going to feel like an idiot for having argued so strenuously against it, which is what I felt like. Right? I was just like you. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. It's terrible. I can't do it. It's awful. Why should I do it? There's no reason to do it. I'll just shower at home. It's easier to shower at home. I can go home. I can go home. I can wait. I don't have to do it this week. I don't have to do it at school. I'll wait. It's only fifth period. I can go through 2 hours of school. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Blah 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 blah. It's easier to do it at home, right? I'll just drive home sweaty. It's not a big deal. And now I'm like, oh fuck, that was fine, dude. What was I worried about? Nothing. Nothing. Right? So cold shower after the gym is fantastic. Well, I prefer a sauna and then a cold shower, or maybe a hot tub and then a cold shower. But absolutely. And actually, I've gone to gyms that did not have locker rooms. Uh, and yes, but see, yeah, I've been to gyms that did not have showers, and you just feel gross. Like you leave and you're like, oh God, this is awful. Haven't you ranted in the past about liberals who push their personal preference on others? See, I'm not pushing my personal preference on you legally. I don't think you should go to jail. I don't think you should be fined. I don't think that you should be legally required to do this. I don't think you should have to go to public school. I don't think you should be required to go to a gym. I am pointing out why this could be beneficial for most people and why they should consider doing it. That's my argument. I'm putting forth the reasons why. And the fact that somebody is terrified of it is actually kind of prima facie evidence that it's something that they should get over. Blah, blah, blah. And when I say should, I mean I'm in a persuasive way. I don't mean in a coercive government way. Like when a liberal says you should pay your taxes or whatever. That's not how I mean it. I feel like media bias towards reporting negative stories has created a huge culture of distrust despite the actual occurrence of events. People are scared of school shootings despite the rarity. This is undeniably part. Thank you, Uncommon Knowledge. That's a great comment. That this is undeniably a part of what's going on here. So I bring up communal showering. Sandusky comes up. Okay, and Sandusky's probably not the only case, but we were talking about a handful of cases. Mixed in with like millions and millions and millions of incidents where nothing happened. Right? This level of invalidation would invalidate everything. Right? You should not drive a car, period, because 30,000 people a year die in the process. You should not drink alcohol, period, because 30,000 people a year die of alcohol poisoning. You should not. Right? So people get molested everywhere. The Boy Scouts have a molestation problem. Should Boy Scouts be banned? The Catholic Church has a molestation problem. Should it be banned? New York City public schools has a molestation problem. Should it be banned? Yes, it should. But so no. But you say you're not terrified, but when people say this might be beneficial for you, and then you just say I won't do it, I refuse, no matter what, then that shows that there is a phobia there. I hate to say it. Not to pick on you. I mean, I love that you're commenting, but I think that you should consider doing this. I own a Facebook group called Men's Locker Room that deals with this issue many times and how our culture has become phobic, especially in males. Ironically, I don't know if it's especially in males, but it's definitely been a shift that's happened, which is initially what got me interested in it. Amophobia, good comeback. Look, come to New Hampshire. I'll take you to the gym. We'll get you fixed. We'll get this all figured out. Yeah, well, we all like our privacy, but there's certain times where it's good to be open, right? You don't want to be this atomized person who's cut off from everybody all the time. Communal showers should be an opportunity for fathers to create an educational event and bonding with males. And I witnessed this when I went to Iceland. It was culture shock, but you would see like a son who's just about to go through puberty, maybe 10, 11, and he's naked and he's with his dad, and they're not awkward about it. They're not shy, and they're just having a conversation about how is school, how are your friends, there's no awkwardness, or like they're much less inhibited, and I don't see how that's bad. In fact, I think that that's good, right? Because and I'll even say I'm not comfortable getting naked with my family. Not that I've had the opportunity to do it. They have actually done studies too. There were some studies done in the UK that showed that like people who had families where they did shower together, say they lived on a farm or something like that, were much more likely to do it in a school environment, even today. I'm going out with a couple friends tomorrow. I'll ask them if they want to shower together. Yeah, yeah. Take them to the gym. Make sure it's got a communal shower and go at it. If they got a sauna or a steam room, all the better. And you say that's funny, like that's actually pretty normal in Iceland, right? One of the most popular things to do in Iceland is to go to a pool, right? If you're gonna hang out with your friends, it's like, oh yeah, let's go to the pool. That would be a normal thing, and just part of going to the pool means you have to get naked and you have to shower at least twice. And they, I mean, when I've gone to Iceland, I'll meet friends, and these are straight friends. These are not gay people who are, maybe I've known them for a couple years online, but I've never met, and they'll be like, "Oh, where do you want to meet?" And I'm like, "Can we meet at Logistas Loig, which is one of the main pools in Reykjavik?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And they like it's unbelievable how nonchalant they are about it. They're not doing the towel dance. They're not nervous. You'll just be going, and they'll be talking about how was their day. Well, whatever conversation you're having as they casually get naked. I was raised in a conservative family, never shared a shower with my dad, as you probably did. I did when I was very young, but it was very infrequent too. I think it is a shame that many of the younger generation in the USA are attacking older generation for being nude in the locker rooms. Also, military men are less shy about their bodies. Yeah, but even the military is changing here. The military is becoming less and less communal showering. It still happens, but it's not as big a deal as it used to be. But there is getting to be a more clear generational gap here. And you can definitely see it. Like if a guy is 40 and above, there's a good chance he will be fairly open with nudity in a public situation. And if he's under 30, or especially if he's under 20, it's not likely that he will. Again, not 100%. There are older guys who are not comfortable, and there are younger guys who are. It's just like the ratios are almost inverted. It took me years to overcome that situation. The first time using an open shower was in 17. And don't you feel better now that you overcame it? Like, do you? I mean, I'm sure at the time it seemed like it was this terrifying thing and super scary. And then after you've done it, it's kind of like, that was not a big deal. Why was that such a terrible thing that I was so afraid of? Right? I mean, it's just like those liberals screaming at a Milo Yiannopoulos. If they just sat back and just like, this isn't. Who cares? It's just a crazy queer who's trying to get attention. Like it's just not that big a deal. That's why you should go, sign fan. If you go and you get naked with others, it forces you to get in shape because you're like, oh damn, I want to look good for the old men in the showers. Like you want to show off. Like my college had personal showers in the locker room. That's definitely the norm now. There are exceptions, but I think basically anytime a college does any kind of renovation, they're going to get away. They're going to get rid of any communal showers that they have. Uh, Fruity. Oh, is fruity a euphemism for something else? Yeah. The first time I felt embarrassed and exposed, but after time you get used to it. That's exactly what happens. Up, up, Yeah, this is another good point, Adirondack guy. It's amazing that there were many evidence of soldiers during World War II having casual communal bathing. Today, the USA compares nudity with sex. So yes, this is true. It's interesting. The society has become more sexualized in media, right? So in television shows, movies, you'll have a lot more overt sex and sexual talk, uh, and but then in private settings, nudity is considered there's like it's never platonic. It's always seen to be sexual, right? A naked man means sex, and it doesn't mean that. It just means a guy who has no clothes. Uh, Fruit is a gay slur. Yeah, I know. I saw. I know about Liberace's. Oh, no wonder you're so sheltered. It's just been fascinating too to see when you see people who are terrified of it and then they do it and they're like, oh, that wasn't such a bad, there's no big deal at all, right? And so whenever I hear someone being adamant, I'm never doing it, I don't want to do it, I feel like that's somebody who is going to change their mind as soon as they do it like once. So that may not always be the case, but that's my impulse. My liberal parents wouldn't let me have a gun until I was 14. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you need your first semi-automatic rifle by 8 or it's too late. I have friends who were like their parents gave them rifles when they were 8 and they said just don't kill anybody and they'd go around shooting animals like in the woods. Like shooting deer and owls and shit. My parents let me drink beer around 13 and get concussions playing football, so you had bad parents. Do you play paintball or airsoft? Nope. I have 11 guns and 3 semi-auto rifles and I'm 25. Good for you. I have more than that though. I'm older than 25 though. Parents should be required to buy AR-15s for their kids. I'm hoping. The last time I went to Porkfest, there was a 14-year-old walking around with an AR-15, and I'm looking forward to seeing him again if he goes this year. But I get upset that Christianity is blamed for the lack of communal bathing, yet it was Christian organizations such as the YMCA, Boy Scouts, and some schools that encouraged even nude swimming. So I don't. First of all, nobody is. In general, society seems to be happy that there's less communal bathing, and so nobody's getting blamed for it. Everyone is kind of like, this is just something that faded away, and nobody, or not nobody, but very few people are making any kind of note, right? It's just not getting recognized. It's been many people have noticed, right? I made the video and I get people commenting, yeah, I've noticed, people who say I've noticed this, it's a shift, And a lot of people think it's a lamentable shift. Why is this changing? Why is this thing that I thought was valuable, and what's the big deal? And now it's suddenly become this taboo thing, right? It's become this taboo thing that people don't want to do, and that it's kind of, if you talk about it, you're suddenly suspect, right? You're probably a child molester or something. Um, so I don't I don't think that Christianity is to blame, because there isn't really any correlation there. In fact, the correlation is the opposite, because is the number of people who identify as religious has gone down. The amount of like nudity has actually gone down as well. It's more of a cultural change. Yes, it is. It's been a very gradual cultural change. I don't think it has a single cause. I think it's multi-causal. Some of the causes make more sense to me than others, but culture's weird because my parents didn't want me to see nudity, but I've had a 410 shotgun behind my bedroom door since I was 12. Like for defense or just for fun? So you feel comfortable having a lethal firearm, but you don't feel comfortable getting naked. See, what you need is peer pressure. You need a group of friends who are gonna like bug you about it until you do it. Well, it doesn't sound like your friends are up to it, so I'm taking the surrogate route and like being that man for you. But you're in Missouri, so it's kind of far away. So you're just gonna have to take. Yeah, your friends are gay. Strip for us on the stream. Yeah, I'm not getting enough donations for that, so sorry. This isn't cam. This isn't cam for you. You finish your shower and you're still alive, Zyklon? Lol. Adirondack guy, if you don't mind my asking, like, how old are you? Like, what year were you born? Uh, Pretty sure he'll only strip for crypto. I'm not set up to receive crypto at this point, so no, that's not true. But is ripping good or bad? I don't even know. Yeah, I got up to 9,000 briefly at one point. But now it's been more in the 6 to 8 range for a couple weeks. Your county doesn't have a traffic light. Where is this in? Is this in Adirondack in New York? I don't have that shirt on today. It's yeah. Bitcoin is over 9,000. Lols. As I commented above, me and my cousins were not allowed to see any kind of nakedness on TV and the course of the home either, regardless of. So neither was I, but at the same time, my parents wanted me to shower with other guys. Like they thought that that was something that I should do. So a little bit different, I guess. Did you have any other extracurricular activities aside from Boy Scouts as a kid? Not really. I did take swimming lessons for a long time, for maybe 6 or 7 years, but it was never competitive, so I was never going in meets. It was just lessons and learning how to swim. And I really enjoyed that, but that was before I got used to communal showering. So every time that the lessons would end, I would literally run to the locker room before anyone else got there, and I'd have to take off my suit because I couldn't get in my car. My parents would pick me up, and I couldn't ride in the car with a wet suit. Although I think there were times where I would just dry with the towel, but sometimes I would take the suit off and then put on underwear without drying off, and then dry off with the underwear on. I was that scared about it. But again, it was never competitive. Then later I got into music, and so I did a lot of music. Oh shit! Thanks, Garrett. I'm gonna keep annoying you until you shower, though. It doesn't matter how much you pay me. That's not gonna end because I'm a principled man and I want to spread my ideology. But thank you, I appreciate it. Um, but music, I practiced a lot of clarinet. When I was a kid, my parents never locked the door in the bathroom, so I would see them naked when I bathed. See, that's the problem, Dr. Berkovich, is you were Swedish, and as an American who was wealthy, apparently, relative to Swedes, I had my own bathroom, so that was never a problem. That's why I never shared showers with dad or uncles, etc. Actually, I never saw male relatives naked. Thought about allowing you to do that, they were. If your parents thought about allowing you to do that, you were pretty lucky. So I saw my dad naked somewhat when I was pretty young, but it wasn't every day or that regular, and I think it pretty much stopped when I was 5. You're welcome. Thanks. But I would be much happier if you said, "Hey, I'm listening to you, and I will consider taking a communal shower at the gym." I would like that better than the money, to be perfectly honest. I was a lower middle class American. We all shared a bathroom. I bathed my brother to save water. Yeah, so this is another. It's not a class thing so much, but if you look back, like say the baby boomer generation, just in general, they had larger families, so more kids on average per household, but also fewer bedrooms and fewer bathrooms per household. So there would just automatically be a lower expectation of privacy. So I know my dad, he always shared the bedroom with at least one other brother and sometimes two other brothers, and much of that time would actually have been more than one brother in the same bed. And then there was one bathroom for a family of 7. So you would just not have had the same expectation of privacy. Whereas when I grew up, I had one brother, but we each had our own bedroom and our own bathroom. So totally different. Yes, this is Melchuk. So this has been the great like dilemma people when they want to make fun of me. Would you if we could flip a switch and everyone would communal shower, but they would also be circumcised? You know, what if you had to pick and choose? Uh, Baby boomers. I'm 38. You're close. You're close. Well, 12, 13 years. Communal circumcision. That's what they do in the Philippines and Turkey and Muslim countries. There are people who do think that there is a connection between circumcision and communal showering. And my intuition is that that is plausible, but I can't actually work out in my head how. So that could just not be the case. To me, anyone over 30 is a baby boomer. But technically, I think it's after 1964 or 65, they become Gen X. Communal showering plus foreskin would be great. Yes, absolutely, that would be wonderful, and that is why I like Iceland so much. Why do you think why do you think it is that Greco-Roman, Enlightenment, and post-Enlightenment cultures, sans the U.S. and Canada, have a positive view of nudity, whereas Judeo-Christian Islamic cultures are so averse to it? So Christian culture has only been intermittently against it, and I don't know about Judaism and Islam. Apparently, they're a little bit more sketch on that topic. So I don't know. The Greeks and the Romans were definitely they kind of saw the body as a temple and as a perfect, made perfect by the gods, and were very aesthetically interested in it. And as you point out, in the Enlightenment, in the Renaissance, a lot of those ideas also took hold. So in the United States, it's tricky because the less Christian we've become, the less communal showering there has been, right? So when Christianity was stronger, there was more communal showering than there is now. So it's kind of the correlation there is not entirely. I'm not entirely sure that it's there. I actually learned how to clean under my foreskin when showering with my dad. Woo! Did you just watch him do it, or did he like show you how to do it? And how old were you when you figured that out? And I'm just curious, Adirondack guy, do you watch my channel because you're a libertarian, or do you watch my channel because of the circumcision foreskin stuff? Or is it just the communal shower stuff? Just kind of curious where people are coming from. He was 27. How do you know? My doctor taught me how to clean mine? No. Came for the libertarianism, stay for the communal showering. Nice. Why aren't you watching the Stanley Cup right now? I don't really care about hockey unless it's my brother's team and they're not in it, so there's no reason to. I had a doctor tell me to wash under my foreskin when I got a physical as a kid. Nobody told me before then. Do you know a sign fan? Is your dad circumcised or uncircumcised? He's probably not. I wonder why he didn't give you that talk. Has this communal showering thing been a long-running preoccupation of yours? You have talked about it a bunch in the forum. Yes, I'd say that's fair. I really didn't like it. It's always been interesting to me. It didn't really get interesting to me in college, and it kind of became interesting just in the sense that I knew that there was this big cultural shift that had happened, and I was curious why. And I was just not satisfied with. I didn't. I always want to know why. Why did this change? And I could not figure out why, no matter where I looked. So I decided to just start making videos about it myself, and to start looking into it more thoroughly. And like I said in the previous live stream, like I've started reaching out to people who are experts in, like, say, physical education, that sort of thing. I reached out to the author. There's a book on gay gym culture called Gym Boys, and I've reached out to that author, and I've talked to him a few times. And sadly, these are things that people notice. Like, everyone that I've talked to has said, yes, you're right, this has changed, this is something that we've noticed, but nobody has a really good answer as why, or a good explanation why. Yeah, I remember seeing that he was circumcised. That's probably why he didn't tell you how to clean it, because he didn't know. But thankfully, your doctor just told you to clean it and didn't tell you to get it cut off. You were lucky in America, because there's a good chance an American doctor would be like, cut that shit off. My priest taught me how to clean under my foreskin with his tongue. Well, that is the best way. Like, you have to have a fine tooth probe, right? Anything else is too abrasive and painful. So a tongue, or maybe a wet pinky finger also works. Hockey is so fast paced, it's intense too. Yeah, hockey is fun to watch. Like, I don't mind watching hockey. I don't take vicarious pleasure in sports. Right? When I watch athletics, I think, why am I sitting here not doing anything? I should do something. I just can't get into it vicariously. So, in fact, I think it's really unhealthy to be that way. It's much better if you go and join a league, or do something on your own. I feel like that's way better. was around 6 when my dad taught me. I watched you because you deal with issues that are great for my Facebook groups. I consider myself a conservative. Wait, so are you posting my videos in your Facebook groups? Not that I mind. Your brother is on an NHL team. My brother is an assistant coach for an NHL team. And he showed me the locker room, and it was fucking amazing. I think the first video I saw of yours length the other was a review of Democracy, the God That Failed. No offense, but you were a little goofy looking back then. I'm still a little goofy looking, so nothing's really changed. That was a long time ago, though. I think I made those videos in like 2011. Also, I don't think you can link the decline of Christianity with the decline of communal showering. Europe is less Christian and engaging more communal showering. Yes, I agree. I agree that I don't really see a correlation there. Um, now, Christianity has been a very influential force within the United States, and so I think it's unlikely that there's much that you could say hasn't been affected by it at all. But I feel like the prudishness, the Puritanism of today is very secular. It's not being religiously driven. It wasn't like, in the 80s they started preaching against getting naked. That's the other interesting thing about this. There was never a public campaign of any kind against communal showering. Never. Like, there's never been some crusader, there's never been an organization, Mothers Against Communal Showering. There's never been there were a couple lawsuits here and there, but they didn't result in, communal showering being declared illegal or anything like that. So this is something that went away without there being a campaign for it to go away, which is really fascinating. Level my camera. Good, bad. Football is the best sport to watch. Well, that I don't agree with. Hockey is boring, and that it's coming from a Canadian. You are handsome with the beard. Well, thank you. You should see me in the communal shower. It's 10 times better. Yeah, a few of your videos in my Facebook group. So what's the kind of reaction that you get, and what videos? I'm kind of curious. I thought your channel died. They were how I found you. My channel didn't die, but there was for a long time where I just did not post. I would post like once every 6 months or something. Yeah, Mothers Against Communal Showering never happened. There's no mothers groups always on a ban fun thing. Yeah, drunk driving, guns, communal showering. Just fucking women voting has just fucked everything up. I blame it on every TV show having an episode about showering at school. So interesting, Stephen Koza. People in this generation now, they think that is a Hollywood myth. They think that is some kind of entertainment fiction that is just make-believe, like it's fantasy. Because they don't, it's so alien to their actual experience, so they just assume that just never happens anymore. American aversion to communal showering is buried very deep in the psyche. Okay, but if that's true, Gregory Matchell, why was it so common and ubiquitous up until about 1995, right? That's kind of a very pivotal year. It got noticed that it had dropped. If it's deeply averse to our psyche, why did we do it for 80 years, enthusiastically? The reaction is mostly that you talk too long. Oh, thanks. Well, I'll take the criticism. Do you think drunk driving should be legal? I think the road should be privatized, and I'll let the private owners of the road make their own rules. Guys, my laptop is sitting on a pillow, all right? It's not a tripod. Women's suffrage is really when the U.S. took a turn for its worst. Look, I agree that was bad, but there have been so many turns for the worst that I don't think that that is the only thing. Boo, boo, boo. Now, I think that most private operators of roads are not going to tolerate drunk driving, but I would leave it to them to decide what to do. They probably would ban you from driving, or they would say, yes, you can drive, but you have to be chaperoned, and so it's going to cost you, so much more to do it. So you'd still be able to get around. They'll still take your money, but they want to do it in a way that's safe to their other customers, so they can't get sued. I don't mind long videos as long as they are information dense, like a university lecture. I don't know if you're ever going to get a university lecture about communal showering, though. Drunk driving will be legal in Kazakhstan. You will be able to go to a drive-through window and get heroin from child laborers. Yeah, of course. And you'll pay them a penny a day. Tell them they have to work for a boss or starve. What if you and your friends want to go to a communal shower, but we live in an ANCAP society and there aren't roads? Well, the thing is, there won't be any regulations either, and we can build our own communal shower without having to file any paperwork. Many of the U.S. founding fathers encouraged nude bathing and swimming. When you say many, I think you mean Thomas Jefferson. I don't know if there are any other ones who said that. Oh, Ben Franklin. Uh, I wonder if the stranger danger pedo hysteria that really ramped up in the 1980s has something to do with the decline of communal showers in the 1990s. I think that's probably part of it. And actually, in the lecture I referenced by Jonathan Haidt, he talks about how like helicopter parenting in general seems to have been a reaction from media hype about a couple cases, high-profile cases of kidnapping. Now, the chances that a child gets kidnapped by a non-parent are very, very, very low and always have been. But there were a couple high-profile cases of it, and suddenly it became not okay to leave your kids unattended. And the idea that communal showering are these dens of constant sexual abuse, that's just completely overblown. Like it can happen, but it's very rare. But I do think that when it has happened, and again, when it happens in a locker room, that doesn't mean it happened in a communal shower. Like, this is what I don't understand. Like, the locker rooms are still there, kids are still changing, and so they're not necessarily safe from an overeager gym teacher or another student or whatever. And again, I've maintained this many, many times. In a communal shower setting, because it is so open and because you're doing it with a group, right? So like in Boy Scouts, we had what we called the buddy system. You weren't allowed to do anything without at least one other person. And so when you would never like be in a shower alone waiting for the creepy scoutmaster to show up and take advantage of you. You would always be there in a group, which made it very practically difficult, if not impossible, not necessarily impossible, but very, very difficult in practice for anything bad to happen. And so I don't think there's anything in particular about communal showers that make them more risky. And in fact, the cases that people will reference, I guess Sandusky was doing stuff in communal showers, but he's also doing stuff not in communal showers. So if they had just banned communal showers, it's not evidence that he would have not done what he did. Right? The amount of control and power and authority that he had over those kids and the number of places that he abused them went way, way, way past that. So again, I don't think that it's really something that would diminish that at all. In fact, being open about it, being open about the sexuality, about being naked, is actually helps you be, hey, this is not a big deal. I could talk about this. If you have body shame and you're afraid to even mention that you got naked, then it's less likely you're going to tell somebody when you get abused. Are you dyslexic? I know you suck at spelling. Crazy how much you read. So I I I may be dyslexic. I was never explicitly told this by like a therapist or anything, but I know that I had to take like special reading classes when I was in elementary school. It was never explained to me, but I had to go out of class and get like special speech therapy, and it was because I had trouble with certain sounds. And I also know that I can't hear the difference between some consonants. So the V sound and the B sound very often sound the same to me. I can't tell the difference. It was actually, and I noticed it in a funny way. If you ever watch Dragon Ball Z, at one point Goku has to fight Frieza's henchman, the Ginyu Force, and one of the Ginyu Force, this big blue guy who is kind of famously fast, his name is Burter, Burtor or something like that. And good night. Thank you, D. Garrett. And think about communal showering, and then let me know once you've done it, because I'll be very happy. Um, but I, whenever I heard his name spoken, I heard it as Werter with a V, not Berter with a B. And it was confusing because when I started trying to look up his power level online, I could never find his name because I would spell it Verter, and no, it was Berter. So, and I also had, well, I took a history class in college where you had to write out these long answers. And the teacher came and said, "We got all this right. You clearly know this material, but I think you're dyslexic." Not only were there a lot of spelling mistakes, but the way the types of spelling mistakes that there were, he attributed to being dyslexic. So I might be. I think it is just because of the consonants, but I don't think it's that extreme. So I don't have any trouble reading. Bah, bah, bah. Yes, Thomas Jefferson did nude swimming, as did John Adams and many more. George Washington allowed the Continental Army to work in the trenches nude and bathe afterwards. Well, I mean, that's all true, but I think you have to remember that logistically that was the way you did it. Like, people didn't wear swimsuits back then. It was before the era. Like, swimsuits really were not a thing until after the Industrial Revolution and after you started getting recreational bathing, like resorts. I mean, people always swam. Like, there's always, through history, back to cavemen, would probably jump into a local body of water to thrash about and whatever. But it wasn't until after the Industrial Revolution in the second half of the 19th century that you kind of had dedicated resorts, beach resorts, for that purpose. And that's when you started getting, hey, we have large groups of people who are reliably showing up, both sexes, and that's when you started getting swimsuits. And it was only for the sake of modesty of protecting women from men. It was not. It was just understood that men should be naked. That there's no reason to wear a swimsuit. Like, swimsuits are not necessary for a human to enjoy the water, but it was a necessary to protect women from from seeing naked men, basically. And so if you go prior to that period, if you're talking about the American Revolution, that's way before then. And so, just getting naked was a way to go. All this reminds me of the nude miners at Chernobyl. This is Tula. Chernobyl was a great show, by the way. I thought it was a fantastic show. Uh, Ironically, if they had banned communal showering, McQuarrie would have never seen Sandusky porking a boy in the shower, and this would never have been reported until much later. Yeah, I think this is they really don't facilitate. As I've said again and again and again, with a stall, with a curtain, you can do anything. You're not leaving. Why are you not leaving? You said goodnight. Oh, you said goodnight to Zyklon Butterfly. Sorry. My mistake. Uh, so in a communal setting, you can only, everything you do is open. So now, if you're at a gay gym where everyone's gay and orgies are the thing, then you can do stuff, right? And I've gone to bathhouses where you can do that, but in a normal setting, you can't really do that without risking exposure, and that's what happened with Sandusky. Just curious, what is an atomized individual? So that's a term I've used this. I've heard this used a couple times, but an atomized individual is somebody who cuts themselves off from socializing in as many ways as possible, with the possible exception of online interactions. So somebody who doesn't go out, who doesn't have friends, who doesn't socialize, who doesn't he doesn't go to the gym, he doesn't work out, he doesn't go to church. He does his own thing, and he just kind of disassociates from as much as possible. doesn't have social interactions to the maximum point. Swimsuits protect your genitals from the water. Chernobyl is great. Soviet nuclear power number one. Does that really happen? I remember David Rubin talking about seeing that at WeHo. Seeing what? I'm not sure what you're asking about, White Fox. Right. So the atomized individual. So I've heard that term basically applied to a certain type of libertarian who's like, I don't want to socialize with anybody, and any kind of talk of people interacting in a social sense I think is somehow anti-libertarian, which I don't think is valid. Right? I don't think there's anything about libertarian that says you have to be a hermit. You should be allowed to be a hermit if you want, but it doesn't mean you have to be. Gay showering orgies at gyms. Well, um, yes, that does happen. First of all, bathhouses are specifically designed for gay men to go and have orgies at, so that's a little bit different. But during YMCA's are kind of famous for this. In fact, in New York City in the 80s, there were a couple YMCA's that were notoriously gay hookup places that did have wild amounts of sex going on and were spreading HIV incidentally. Um, and that still can and does happen, but it's much more rare. The culture has shifted. With the growth of apps, now that you can get a phone and you can use Grindr and you can meet whoever you want, you do not have to go to a gym to meet people. But prior to that period, that was a quite common thing that people would do. You join a gym, you would join whatever, a YMCA, and you would hook up there. Do you ever listen to Jason Stapleton? And if so, what do you think? I watched one episode and I just didn't get into it. So I don't have anything against him, but I never got into it. Um, Foreskin protects your glands from temperature shock in cold water, and I suppose really hot water in the shower. Guys, I don't watch the Stanley Cup play. I was in jiu-jitsu this afternoon, and they were like, "Hey, are you watching the play? Are you watching the Stanley Cup Finals?" And I was like, "No, I don't watch. I don't watch golf." And they didn't think it was funny. Yeah, no, foreskin definitely does protect your head, and you get to the point where it feels weird when it's not covered up. It's supposed to be covered up. It feels much better covered up. So are there now less gays at gyms, or would you not know? I don't know if this is statistically demonstrated, but it may be because you do not have to go to a gym to hook up. Also, the whole AIDS crisis kind of sullied the idea of gays going to gyms and having orgies. So a lot of gyms, and I've been to gay gyms in New York City. I've been to the gym that Anderson Cooper goes to in the Time Warner. It's called Eclipse. And it was fascinating. Almost everybody there was gay, but there was no hooking up going on. And the way it was designed, it was interesting. They didn't have communal showers. They had stalls. But the stalls had glass doors, and the doors, they weren't opaque or cloudy. They were perfectly clear. And I was like, why? What's the point? Because then the point is then you can't have people mess around then. You can see everything that's going on, and there isn't enough space to fit a whole bunch of people, so you can't, right? So, and I was told that they're basically, after the 80s and the AIDS crisis, you kind of had a divergence among gay gyms, where some of them said, okay, we're going to be gyms that gay men go to, but we're not sex scenes, we're not orgy places, and the other ones were just kind of become bathhouses. I would say it's not very common at the vast majority of gyms. The gym I go to has communal showers, but if someone were to be staring, I'm sure they would be called out for it at least. Yeah, so I don't think it's very common at all. I've never seen it happen at my gym. Uh, I've never seen it happen at other gyms. I've done it at other gyms when I've done it with somebody, but it was never with a random person. It was always with somebody who I knew who they were before I walked into the locker room. So it's just not very common anymore. It does happen. Anyone who's curious about this, by the way, there is actually a book on this called Gym Boys, which is about gay gym culture, and it's actually a fascinating read because gays and gyms actually have a very intertwined history in the second half of the 20th century in the United States. Gay aesthetics heavily influenced hetero aesthetics. So like the kind of the quintessential body beautiful that most people think about was very much influenced by gay ideals about that. Um, but uh, yeah, but they're not very hookup anymore. But there's a whole, I mean, in the book he talks about how what you would do is you would be in a sauna and you would just start jerking off, and if you would see if other people would interact, or if other people were there and they said, "Hey, stop that, that's gross," then you would know, hey, nothing's going to happen. If they allowed you to do it, then that might be an evidence that they might be down for something. But I've never seen that happen, and I've certainly never tried. Uh, I live in my Missouri, like I said, and St. Louis is getting ready to win the Cup. So I was in St. I go through St. Louis about once a year. I went through it last summer, and I got lost in a park in the middle of the city all night. Is Anderson Cooper still in the closet? I don't think so. He's a Vanderbilt and a CIA person. Yep. Howdy, Ron. It was a YMCA thing. It still happens. I have a friend whose mother is a manager of a YMCA in Omaha, Nebraska, of all places. And she says that he told me that she tells him that it's quite normal actually to catch people doing stuff. She said that they used to get complaints almost every day of two 16-year-old boys. So these are both 16-year-olds who were sucking each other's dicks in the steam room. And the adults would go and complain and be like, "Hey, we don't," and they had to sit the boys down and be like, "We're going to kick you out if you keep doing this. You're not allowed to do this." So, but they said it was pretty normal that they would do walkthroughs of the locker room and find stuff going on. Not whole orgies with dozens of guys or anything along those lines, but one or two guys messing around. And when you talk to gay dudes, lots of them have stories, but you're looking at somebody who's a 25-year-old guy who's got maybe almost a decade or a half decade of sexual experiences, and he's got like a handful that happen to the gym, if that, and sometimes none. Gays and gyms or gays and gyms. Ha, lol, both. Do you think that gay openness has helped cause a fear of communal showers today? I actually do think this is one of the contributing factors. Uh, it's Again, it's hard to quantify, but they do slightly correlate. And I do think that there was, in the past, people knew that there were gay people, but you could plausibly deny and just say, "Hey, it's no homo, bro. It's just platonic." As soon as you admit that there are gay people, then suddenly there's this expectation. Well, this could be sexual. And I know I had one straight guy tell me that, hey, in a straight guy's mind, a straight guy's image of himself, he's a sexual predator. Not in a rapey sense, but he's out there hunting women. He's the sexual. He has sexual prowess. He has sexual power, and he's out there, getting the girls. Not in a rapey way, but just in a competitive way. Um, and for him to think that he could be the prey, that someone else could be viewing him as a sexual object, that's discomforting to a lot of guys. And so even if nothing happens, just the fact that it could happen can bother a lot of guys. Um, but again, it's weird because you would think, now that, I mean, I don't like the term not homophobia, but acceptance of gays is pretty high, right? I think most people are pretty comfortable with it. But in that scenario, no. And I know, like, I don't mess around with people. I don't advance on people. I don't try and hook up. I don't do sexual talk. I don't try and get people's number. I don't flirt. And most of the time at the gym, if I see someone who's attractive, I might like initiate contact. Hey, how's it going? How's your workout? And most of the time that works out fine. And I've made a lot of friends doing that. But every once in a while, you can kind of tell that somebody is not comfortable with the situation, and then you just back off and don't do that anymore. Um, Right. I'm very careful not to cross any lines where they could say, "Hey, this guy said hello to me," right? So what? I said hello, But I hear St. Louis is not a town you want to get lost in. It was in this very large park in the center of the city, and it was at like 2 a.m. And I was lost for about 3 hours, and it was pretty scary. Who has better barbecue, Kansas City or St. Louis? I played hockey in high school with two guys who are now out, and we showered together all the time. Never caught them checking me or others out, etc. Uh, yeah, gays have been showering with straight dudes forever, and as usual, nothing ever happens. Yeah, I shower with straight dudes all the time, every day. Nothing ever happens. It's super super rare. Um, Only time it made me uncomfortable was when a gay guy asked me out. He didn't keep advancing after I told him I wasn't gay. Um, I've related this story before, but I was talking to a guy in Grinder once, and we ended up not hooking up. We just talked a few times, but I mentioned that I started talking about my gym, and he said he sounded nice, so he actually joined my gym, and he was prematurely bald. He was only 27, but he lost most of his hair, so he'd always wear a baseball hat and a blue tank top, and he was quite I guess the term would be creepy, but he would follow people around. Like he followed me around. If I ever brought like a twink, like a friend of mine who was a younger twink, he would follow us wherever we would go. And I mean, sometimes it was pretty blatant. At one point, we were going into the locker room and he was leaving. This was in the winter, so he was done. He had a coat on, he had his gym bag all packed. He was walking out the door, and he saw us go into the locker room, and as we passed, he kind of acknowledged me and gave me a little wave, and we passed. And then he did a double take. I think he noticed, hey, I'm with this younger guy, and he followed us. And then he followed us into the steam room. Actually, when we went to the locker room, he came up to me and goes, "Are you guys going to use the steam room?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And he's like, "Can I come?" And I was like, "Well, you have a membership here. You can do what you want." But I mean, it is a little weird if you're already leaving, like you've already done your workout, you've done your shower, you're walking out the door, to about faced and head right back, right? So uh, he joined us, but like he didn't try and do anything. And what was interesting is, oh, maybe a year later, I started befriending this guy who's a very very cute guy who I would see shower, and I don't want to creepily stare. So at one point, I just started a conversation with him, and we started talking. We never talked about me being gay. He didn't know I was gay, but we would sauna together, we would shower together, we'd work out together, and of course in the sauna we would talk, and we kind of became friends. And he told me one day, again, he doesn't know that I'm gay, and he was like, "Oh my God, this guy with a baseball hat and a blue tank top just followed me to every, like, whenever I go to a bench, he'd go to the bench next to me, and he followed me into the steam room, and I'm pretty sure he's a faggot." And this is a normal commercial gym with very few gay dudes. And of course, he's telling me this story, and I know that I know the guy who's following him. I know his name, so I know that it's true that this is a gay person. But I didn't want to be like, "Oh yeah, I know that guy. I invited him to join this gym." So I said, "Okay, uh, there's there's thousands of members at this gym, and some of them are going to be gay, and some of them are going to be in the locker rooms. And if you get naked," and this guy was not shy about getting naked, I think because he played football, um, that they're going to see you gay. They're going to see you naked. And if you're not comfortable with that, then you should, maybe not get naked. But, it's not a big deal if all he's doing is seeing you. But if you think someone's crossing the line, or if they're getting too pushy or too forward, then you should just tell them to back off. And that's probably going to end it. And that's exactly what happened. A week later, we're in the sauna again. And he said, "Yeah, that guy followed me into the sauna, and I told him to back off," and he did. Missouri, Kansas, Missouri. I swear, football, hockey players, and swimmers have no modesty in the locker room. Okay, hockey players, I 100% agree. Hockey players, I mean, the youngest people I've seen walking around the showers were hockey players. And I'm talking like 14, 15, 16. Not shy at all. Just completely walking around, steam room, communal shower, in a group, in a whatever, totally not caring. Football players, it's hit or miss. Some teams are not showering anymore. And so you have a lot of high school players who are not really used to it and don't actually show any more than anyone else. But sometimes they do. Sometimes they do it as a team. So at my gym, there's actually a whole bunch of guys who just graduated. They're seniors. And they, it kind of, at first, none of them were showering. And then one of them started. And then he kind of brought his friends. And now there's a group of 5 or 6 of them that do it. Right. But they kind of do it as a group, as a team. They don't do it as an individual, as individuals that often. So there's safety in numbers, I guess, there. Swimmers, you would think, but at my gym, there's a swim team at my gym. They are absolutely, they do the towel dance. Like, this was, I joined my gym. I knew they had a swim team. Of course, everybody on the swim team is quite attractive. And they have swim teams that start like at 5 and go all the way to, 18-year-olds in high school. And it's a quite good, some of the kids who go there do get full ride scholarships. Some of them, none of them have made it onto the Olympic team, but they've made it to like quarterfinals and semifinals, on Olympic trials team. So it's a pretty good team, and you would think that they would be pretty open. Right? You have a kid who's been on a swim team since he's 5. He's been on the team for 10 or 12 years. He's in a Speedo for hours at the time. He's been in the newspaper and on television in a Speedo. That's, you'd think that they would be pretty comfortable. And no, when they would go shower, they would shower in their swimsuits. They would dry off with their swimsuits on. They would put on a t-shirt that goes halfway to their knees. They would wrap a towel around their suit, and then they would reach under the towel, take the suit off, and then put underwear on underneath the towel. Right? So I call it the towel dance. So that's the way that they acted. Now, it's fascinating. One of those guys got a scholarship to go to West Point. Right? He was a really good swimmer. He got a full ride scholarship to go to West Point. And he went to West Point, and as soon as he came back the next summer, he was totally not shy, walking around naked, dropping it without a second thought. And his little brother was still on the swim team, and he berated him and the team for being so shy. But when he was in high school, he was the same way. So you would think swimmers would be more open, but that's not even necessarily the case anymore. Good God, we had to start showering naked in swim school. I never saw anyone in high school in a swimsuit. Yeah, it's really bad, Chance. It's really, really bad. Uh, what you kind of see are stages. Stage, you start mandatory showers. Everyone has to do it. It's ubiquitous. Um, there are still places in the United States where that happens. The town that I go out in Wyoming, Gillette, Wyoming, they still require it starting in 7th grade for everybody, whether it's gym, whether it's just an athletic team, everybody. And you can tell, I don't go to the school, but when I go to the rec center, the community rec center, nobody is shy, nobody's hiding. And even the people who are younger than that, who haven't been forced yet, because they know that that's an expectation, because they know that older kids do it, and they want to act mature or whatever, they do it too. Uh, but that is now very, very rare. There are very few schools that are doing that. Some private schools do it. Boarding schools, so if you hear about the elite boarding schools like St. Paul's School, which is where Robert Mueller and John Kerry went, there's some cool pictures of them on the hockey team, St. Paul's School hockey team. Black and white pictures from the 50s or 60s whenever they were on the team. They do communal showering all the time. And it's still to this day. I've hooked up with guys who go there, and they still do it. But that's like an elite private school, if that tells you anything about the merits of it. But then you would have basically a period of optional, right? So teachers and gym teachers would stop requiring it as being something you had to do. And then at that point, you get radical divergences where you have, if you'd already been doing it for 3 or 4 years, you might continue to do it, but subsequent groups of new cohorts of children, the next year's freshmen may not. So you get this really you get this real different, spread where at some schools it might continue, other schools it might stop. And then, but typically though, you'd still have athletic teams that would continue to do it, especially hockey, football, wrestling, basketball and track, less common, but it could still happen. Swimming. But fast forward decade by decade by decade, and even then, the people on those teams are less and less likely to be okay with it. And it's less and less, the coaches, it's becoming more and more politically incorrect to insist that your players do it. And so, um, unless they're making a real concerted effort to peer pressure them to do it, which I think can be effective, they stop. So I've met guys who played football, who did wrestling, who did soccer. They never took a shower, never once, and that's more and more common. And when I'm looking at, the swim team at my gym, they never do it. They will never do it until they go to college, and even then not. So it's really, really reduced pretty far. Have you ever been to a nude beach? Bit of a culture shock to see families, old, young, etc., let it all hang out in Spain. No, I haven't been to any nude beaches. There is one in Vermont that's like a gay nude beach, and I've never gone. What is your stance on bullying? Well, it depends what you define as bullying, what my stance is. Uh, that's hella dangerous if you're in wrestling. Yeah. So the argument for showering in wrestling is quite, just the hygienic reasons for doing it are quite good. And again, Chance was saying this yesterday, and I've said I always heard that it was a state law that if you were on the wrestling team, you had to shower. That may not have been actually true. It might have just been, a thing, something people said, but it would have made sense if it was. Um, and it has gotten to this bizarro land where something that is hygienically completely justified and even the responsible thing to do is not being done because people are too shy and nobody's willing to say fucking grow up and take a shower. And I also would extend this to people using pools. You really should shower naked, not in a suit. Shower naked in a suit, without a suit, before you use a pool. If you shower with a suit, fecal matter, piss, whatever, skin, that's all going to end up in your suit, and then you're going to go jump in the pool and it's going to end up in the pool. And yes, the chlorine is going to help, but it's still fecal material. So uh, as far as I know, it's required by law for high school wrestlers associations to shower after every practice. That may be the law, but you got to wonder how often it's enforced, because I know I've met wrestlers who say, "No, I never did it and I never would." I know in my state you can only have wrestling matches at facilities with showers. Sure, but if you that doesn't mean that they're actually making the kids do it. I know you are libertarian, but I am sure you have heard the slogan, I need red flags and long nights, but what are your thoughts about that, or rather or not the revolt is therapy for the masses? I've not heard this slogan, I need red flags. I'm not sure what you mean, national communism. Try and rephrase the question. Uh, but yeah, there's just been this procession of, yeah, gym classes would do it, now gym classes won't. Sports teams would continue to do it for a few years longer, maybe a few decades longer, and then they won't do it, and then you get to the point where nobody does it. Then you get to the point where the schools realize that their communal shower facilities are never getting used, and they basically start dismantling them. This is how bad it's gotten. So they start using them as storage, and then they start dismantling them. And that's actually a real common thing now for schools to have communal shower facilities that have been, have been gotten rid of or been taken down, or the water's been turned off because nobody ever uses them and they're bone dry all the time. Which was the case at the, when I was in middle school and high school. They had communal showers. Those were older buildings. My high school was actually built in 1998 or 1999, and they did have communal showers. I think they built, at that point, the architects were going by the architectural designs that had dominated school construction for the last 50 years, and so they put communal showers in. But that was like when the days of communal showering were numbered and were already over pretty much. So I'm kind of curious if they're still there. I guess one of these days I'm gonna have to hook up with a high school guy who goes there now, and maybe they can tell me. But again, yeah, it's sad that our kids are not using showers in schools after games. They stink on the bus. Yes, that's all true. Again, some teams it's less true. I think hockey players are pretty good about this. Hockey players almost always have long bus rides and are just so ungodly dirty that I just think that's a place where the culture and their facilities always have showers. So it's not zero. But if you have a high school with 1,000 kids and there's only 30 or 40 of them that are taking showers, then it's culturally been reduced to like a tiny fraction. Speaking of communal showers, does anyone else think that gendered bathrooms are pointless? No, I don't think they're pointless. Now, in certain situations, I don't think they're necessary, right? It's fine to have unisex bathrooms in certain situations. That a lot of guys, say incels, for example, need something like economic class to connect to, and or in the 60s in America and France, sex and revolt really help young males find peace. I'm sorry, I don't think I'm following you. Oh, thank you, White Fox. How did I earn $1.53? My high school was built around the year 2000, had communal showers, but they weren't used except by wrestlers and individuals voluntarily. And I've heard of that. I was talking to a guy I think he was probably 25 or 26, and he said that his high school, they didn't require communal showering. But he did get very dirty, and like he has BO problems, and he would get very sweaty in gym class. And he said, hey, he asked the teacher, can I get out 5 minutes early, 10 minutes early to go shower? And the gym teacher said, yeah, of course you can. And then what started to happen is like other kids who just didn't want to play the sports would do that as well, and it kind of became a joke because it was only guys who would do it, and the girls started joking, there go the boys to go shower. Now he was gay, but he said he was only doing it because he was dirty and wanted to get clean before class. uh, as a former high school hockey player, I can assure you that U.S. hockey players always shower. I've even showered in locker rooms that both opposing teams have had to share. Oh, that would be just awesome. Yeah, I mean, and there was an AHL team here in Manchester that actually had a contract with my gym, and so they would use it and they would come and take team showers, and it was pretty fucking hot. I actually got into foreskin restoration because of that. I was showering with the Manchester Monarchs hockey team in 2015, and like half those guys were uncircumcised Canadians, and that was what kind of prompted me to start doing it. Actually, I mean, I knew it was a thing before that, but that was like, well, damn, it was inspirational. Yeah, fuck you. I'm gonna fill that out on my taxes. I can't. Oh God. See, I'm not that upset because I still have all of my hair. See, if I was bald, I would be more touchy about that. Um, so yes, Chance, I agree with you. My experience is that hockey players are the best about this. They're the most likely. Football players are hit or miss, which I can't. Look, football is such a disgusting thing. You feel like they really ought to, but they don't. Swimmers, you think that they would, but they don't. Not systematically, but I think hockey players do. It's just so fucking gross, and it's just part of the culture. They all do it. And I remember too, in my anecdotal experience, I remember my brother. He went through the same process that I did. He actually went through it before me because he's growing up doing whatever sprites and peewees and bantam, and as a little kid he's not showering, and at some point, when they're like 8, 9, 10, some of the kids start showering because they need to, right? Because they're dirty, and their parents are probably telling them, hey, you stink, we don't want to take you home. And my brother, like many people, was really nervous and didn't want to do it, and so he would the game would end, and it was weird. You'd get this thing where like a certain proportion of the kids would stay in shower and a certain portion of the kids wouldn't. And every year and every game, even, the number of kids who would shower would increase. More and more would start doing it. More and more would start doing it. And you'd have this dwindle effect where, at the beginning of the season, let's say, and I don't know, I think he was probably 10 or 11 when this finally happened. Like, at the beginning of the season, yeah, like 80% of the kids are not showering. Halfway through the season, like 80% of the kids are showering. You get to the end where you just have 2 or 3 kids who are the holdouts. And by then they're getting peer pressured, and then their parents are like, dude, you're dirty, and all the other kids are not dirty. And I remember one day, we're sitting around the dinner table because, we were a nice family, and we always had dinner on the table when mom and dad made dinner, and we always sat and had a good meal. And we would always talk about what we did during the day. And my dad went to my mom and said, oh, and my little brother's name is Brian. He's like, Brian, why don't you tell them about the game? So they talk about the game, who won, if he scored a goal, whatever. But that was totally incidental. Like, that wasn't the main event, right? But then he was like, well, tell her what happened after the game. And then he gets this big grin on his face, like he's really proud, like, right, like that he's done something really cool. And he's like, oh, I took a shower. And he was just like thrilled, like, I'm a big boy, like, I'm not a little kid. I'm not afraid. Like, here's this thing that I was afraid to do and that I would avoid, and I had all this trepidation about, and I overcame my fears, and I did it with all of my friends, and I'm one of them. I'm one of the buddies now. And from then on, he showered with them, whatever team he was on, all the time, and he wouldn't even think about not doing it. And it was just, again, very interesting to see this. I'm afraid, I don't want to do it, I'm going to avoid it, it's terrifying, I can't do it, it's just weird. They do it, and they're like, oh, this was, not only was this okay, this was fantastic. This was this bonding experience that you don't want to have a game and not have that at the end. Ba-ba. If people don't want to communally shower, why don't the schools just have stalls instead? Seems strange that people would smell. Well, so they are doing that. Like, a lot of places are adding some stalls or all stalls. And one of the researchers that I reached out to, actually, he didn't care about communal showering or anything like that. He only cared about physical fitness. And the thing is that fear of showering was causing kids to either not take gym or to purposely not exert themselves so they would not have to shower, which, because he wants the kids to exert themselves because they can get a better workout. And so he was advocating. I won't say who this guy's name is because I sent this guy an email, and he's retired, and he said, don't give out his name unless I run it by him. So I haven't run anything by him, so I'm not going to give out his name. But he did a lot of work with, like, the California Athletic Association or whatever, and he was telling them that he wants them to build, like, really nice locker rooms that have showers, but that, they have stalls and everything. He wants kids to have a good time and not be afraid to work out. And he saw showers as an impediment to that because kids were nervous about it. I'm sorry, but I will not use unisex showers. I'm not comfortable. For me, it's like deciding to have a male and female doctor giving me a physical. But if others are cool about it, that's their choice. Yeah, so here's the libertarian solution to this, guys. I'm not okay with it. I don't want to shower with a girl. I think that's gross. But I can totally understand. It should be up to the place, right? If one place says, hey, at our place, unisex or transsexual or whatever, that's their choice. And other places could say, we want to have it split. That's their choice as well. And the idea that there's a one-size-fits-all is just totally ridiculous. My opinion is once guys shower in a communal shower at least once, they no longer care about it and they don't mind doing it. I agree with this chance. This is basically true. And this is why I find frustrating when people say, I'm not going to do it. I'm afraid to do it. It's scary. There's no reason to do it. And I just like, there'll be a 180 degrees change in that feeling as soon as they do it once, right? As soon as they do it once, they'll be like, oh, it's no big deal. In fact, if you're doing it with your friends, if you're doing it with your peers, people that you're close with, it's actually really rewarding. St. Louis won the Stanley Cup. Well, New England is going to fall apart now. My university dorm had unisex bathrooms, including showers. Some guy figured out a way to take pictures of some girls, and they resegregated the bathroom showers. Yeah, so when I go to Dartmouth, I have a lot of guys that I hook up with at Dartmouth. Dartmouth has that. Dartmouth has has these unisex bathrooms, right? You go into the bathroom and they've got like 2 stalls, no urinals, and like 2 showers, and it's both genders. It's both sexes. It's really weird. That was what I thought about communal showers. It was for the older kids and part of becoming a man. Yep, you grow up, you're a shy child, you're nervous about your body, you're too shy to handle being naked in front of other people, and you grow and you develop the character to be able to, hey, this isn't a big deal, and that's really good. And this goes again, Jonathan Haidt, his research is showing that this is necessary, right? If you coddle people and say, "Oh, you don't want to get naked because you're scared," okay, we won't make you do it. You'll be fine. Like, okay, that's not helping them. That's coddling them. It makes it worse. As someone who's played hockey, I can attest it's almost impossible not to shower because no sports players stink worse. That smell is incredible if you haven't experienced it. So I've experienced it secondhand, and I agree because it's something about the padding. It's something about the way that you like all of that stuff just absorbs all of your sweat in like the worst way, and like I don't know, it just all sticks to you, and it's probably not so. In the NHL, it's not so bad because they get new shit like every game, but for everybody else, they wear the same shit. Like I mean, they might have 2 or 3 pairs, but they wear the same stuff over and over and over and over again, and like hockey bags are just ridiculously awful. And the thing is, like, I know that like my parents were bitching to my brother when he was like 10, like, hey, the game is over and now we have to drive an hour back to where we're from, and you smell like shit, and so fucking take a shower. And yeah, and then if they were on a team, can you imagine a team bus, with 20 kids or whatever? Holy shit, 20 high school kids? No way. When I was in high school, my mother opened my hockey bag once, only once. Yeah, I will say my brother took me to the locker room for his NHL team, and like God, it's nice, so nice. While a guy strictly takes photos of me in the communal showers and see it on the internet, I would find it flattering, but it's no good, not a good idea. I think this is a new fear, guys, today. I think it is a new fear for guys today. I think this is a point. People brought this up in my video on communal showering. I don't think this is the cause though, because it just doesn't match. The decline in communal showering can pretty well be traced to the first half of the 1990s. Between 1990 and 1995, it just collapsed. And that is a long time before you had digital phone cameras circulating everywhere. So there was definitely a cultural shift that predates, right, the rise of smartphones. The other thing I have a problem with is almost all teenagers have smartphones and they have Snapchat, and they are taking and sending nudes to their friends and to their girlfriends and whatnot. And so they're very open about sharing that, and they have to know, even if they're sharing it with their friends, that they're putting themselves at a high risk of having their images shared. Like, not a high risk, but the fact that you're taking images and sharing them, even if you're doing it on Snapchat or whatever, the chance you're just making it very possible that this could happen. So the idea that like, oh, I can't possibly take a communal shower because what if somebody takes a picture of me, which by the way is a good reason to have a no phone policy. And it's another good thing about communal showers is like you can't have, there's no way to hide it. Whereas if you have stalls with curtains, you could open the curtain just a little bit and stand back and photograph through the angle, right? So uh, uh, it's it doesn't make sense to say this is I won't communal shower because I'm worried about my images getting out there when they're taking images and sending them all the time, which is really what's happening. Uh, if showering with men builds character, why doesn't showering with women also build character? That's a good question. Maybe it does, but it's also icky. It might be a different type of character. I think that here's one way to look at it. It's with men who are straight, it's platonic. They're having a platonic bonding experience. It's not going to be platonic with women, probably. Uh, what if they were raised with shared showers? Would they still complain? Probably not. I need to go, but I just wanted to y'all know I have a Discord group where we organize to ban circumcision and force funding for foreskin regeneration. Hit me up if anyone wants to invite. Oh, okay. Not that I don't think it shouldn't be banned, because I think it should be banned, but I think that the backlash against the ban at this point would be make things worse, just pragmatically speaking. My personal research shows me that the decline in same-gender nude swimming and bathing began in the mid 1960s, but I agree the greatest increase was around 1980, 1990s. So uh, there's actually a lot. There's actually a lot of evidence for the nude swimming, because there's a lot of photographic evidence, and you can see kind of two trends. One, females are rarely naked. Like at no point during since photography has been a thing has female nudity been encouraged, unless it's in a situation where it's just females, and even then it's not that common. Um, Initially, through basically the entire 19th century, male nudity, even if there were females around, was considered okay. Then you started to have this: if there were females around, older men should be covered. And you can kind of like, so if you were an adult, you should be covered, but boys or even teenagers, what they weren't. And so that was up until like the 1910s, 1920s. And then slowly the age that you could be naked in public decreased. And so you can actually find some videos of like swimming contests from the 30s where some of the boys are wearing suits and some of them aren't, and there's female spectators. Um, but then you have this situation where, okay, all public it's going to be with a suit if you're on a beach. However, in pools they would segregate by the sexes, and you would have both. And there's a great documentary on YouTube that you can Google. It's called Naked Swimming in School. Probably got taken down by YouTube actually as being hate speech now that I'm mentioning it. So if you didn't get a chance to see it before that happened, I'm sorry. You missed a good documentary. And naked swimming in schools and at YMCA's was still very common in the 50s and the 60s, into the 70s and into the 80s. Now, once you got synthetic suits became more common, it wasn't as logistically necessary to require people to swim naked. So that was the decline there. Um, but it used to be quite famous that at YMCA's would offer free swimming lessons and say, bring a towel, don't bring a suit. Uh, and there is evidence that there was increasing resistance on the part of children, right? So in the 50s and 60s, there were kids who were nervous, but they weren't going out of their way to stop it. In the 70s, you start getting stories of kids like actively trying. So one thing, in extreme cases, you would have kids who would break glass and throw it into a pool, so the pool would have to be closed because they didn't want to shower. Um, but the big shift really happened when gym teachers and administrators and parents started caving and started saying, we don't want to hurt our kids' feelings. And the gentleman that I contacted, he mentioned something called the child rights movement. So basically, it was started to be like, hey, children have more rights than we initially thought, and we can't force them to do this stuff, or we shouldn't force them to do this stuff. And then they stopped forcing them, and then they stopped doing it. I haven't showered with dudes, but I have showered with an ex-girlfriend. Does that make you happy? Nope, not the same thing. Doesn't count. Nope. You're gonna have to shower with your buddies at the gym. I don't know if you work out or whatever, but start working out at a place with a communal shower, and boom. Have you ever seen Space Troopers? You mean Starship Troopers? There's a communal shower scene with both sexes. Yes, but that's a horrible movie about pro-fascism. We have strategies to mitigate the backlash, but they're too bit too complicated to hash out in text chat. Well, I think we can all agree that it should just not be subsidized, right? At the very least, Medicaid and Medicare should not be giving out circumcisions. Like taxpayers should not be paying for them, and that will be the number one. I think that's the best first step that we can hope for. I do agree with bans. Don't get me wrong. I think ethically it's justified to ban the practice, but as long as the culture insists that it's okay, we're gonna cause a lot of problems. If you have a solution to that, I'd love to hear what it is because I would be interested in hearing that. Naked Swimming in Schools, part 1, 2, and 3 is still up. All right, everyone go watch it. It's a great documentary. Do you support public nudity in certain situations? Or I'm not a nudist. I don't think you should be naked all the time in every situation, but in certain situations. It is satire and it's a horrible movie. Well, it's by Heinlein, right? And Heinlein's a bit of a libertarian. He also wrote "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress," if I'm not mistaken. Um, is length pushing men to be naked in gym showers in order to force others to be gay with him? Because, well, okay, I think we don't need a cultural shift. We can just get this done with the Civil Rights Act. Yes. All we need is a law to be passed. That's the answer. Do you think all the bad fitness advice out there is a form of market failure? Nah, I think market failure has a specific definition, and I don't think that's it. We want to unleash a culture terror. A culture terror. I don't like that term. By protesting circumcision outside schools, outside churches, at boys' sports leagues, games, public schools. It really depends how you do this. If you do it wrong, people just get defensive and they think that you're the villain and that you're some kind of zealot. And I don't think that's what you want to come across. Now, maybe that's not how it's going to come across, but if you call it cultural terror, that's kind of how it sounds. By the way, what is foreskin restoration? I am circumcised, by the way. Hey, Chance Hurley, how did you come across my channel? Why did you start watching my channel? Just by the by. And I do have videos on foreskin restoration. Uh, I'll elaborate, but I want you to answer my questions first, and then I'll elaborate. Uh, Hi, I'm from Mexico. Lol, here, open showers isn't a common thing. It's kind of normal. Sadly, here people are mostly religious and see nudity as bad or morally inappropriate. That's interesting because in like Latin countries, like say Italy or France, that's not really the case. But what is your response to the claim that libertarianism is just Jewish ghetto ethics and therefore obviously wrong? Uh, hmm. Well, I think it's fair to say that it's Jewish ghetto ethics because so many libertarian thinkers are Jews. So, that's fair. But, Jews are right quite a bit. So just because, right, I think the problem there is to say that Jews are obviously wrong when only liberal Jews are obviously wrong. Libertarian Jews are obviously correct. There's a large amount of intactivism on 4chan because there's a high population of anti-Semites. But there's also a large amount of intactivism among Jews. Like all the books that I've read about intactivism, save maybe one or two, are by Jews. Anywhere boys and parents are in proximity, when you confront parents right in front of their kids, it's just like the jig is up. You can actually shame them into becoming regret parents. Maybe. I hope so. It's a little late once they already did it, though. Just saw your golden gun video and communal shower video and happened to be online at the same time last night. Never seen your foreskin videos. Oh, so you have no... Okay, wow. So just a little biography. Most of my channel is about libertarian stuff. I'm a very strong, hardcore, anarcho-capitalist radical libertarian and have been like for a long time. And the vast majority of my videos are on that topic or various aspects of that topic. Communal showering is not directly related to libertarianism. It's just something that I found personally very interesting. Foreskin restoration is similar to that, and then there's nothing particularly libertarian about it. Although libertarians debate circumcision. There's a lot that libertarians would have to say about a debate on circumcision, right? Because libertarians like to debate things like what are the rights of the parents, what are the rights of the child, who's a victim, is there restitution owed, is it a crime, that sort of thing. Oh, you're a libertarian, that's how you found me. Boom. So foreskin restoration is a process whereby a man who is circumcised can gradually quote restore his foreskin. You can't, when you are circumcised, most of the tissue that is lost is just the inner foreskin and the outer prepuce. And then you also lose some specialized tissues, usually the frenulum, which is if you look under your tongue, you have a frenulum. That little thing that attaches your tongue to the bottom of your mouth. On your dick, you normally would have that attaching the dorsal part of your, not the dorsal, the bottom of your glands to your foreskin. Cut guys, they usually have a little bit left, but most of it's cut away. And then you're also missing like the ringed band. The tip of the foreskin forms a pucker that kind of hugs the glands really close. So when you're circumcised, all that is removed. Some of that stuff you can't get back, but a lot of it you can. If you apply tension to your skin, over time it will grow and eventually recover your glands, or penis, that is it's usually called. And this will, at the end, will produce a penis that looks like it's uncircumcised, right? They can end up looking indistinguishable from uncircumcised penises. A lot of the function comes back. You can have sex in a way, you can masturbate in a way that's much closer to what an uncircumcised man would be. The gland becomes much more sensitive. Yeah, so you don't get it all back. You get this is a wonky thing. It's very hard to quantify, but guys who get circumcised as an adult will often say that they feel like they lost 80 or 90% of their feeling, but when they restore, they can get it back to like 70%. So basically though, it's a long-term process. You apply tension to the skin. People can do manually with their hands, but people also use like devices. There's lots of little devices you can get, and you apply tension to the shaft skin of your penis, and over time it will grow and eventually recover the glands. And oh my God, you just found my channel like a couple days ago, and you spent 4 hours watching last night. So kudos to you. Thank you very much. Now, the point is not to prevent another circumcision. The point is to create cultural consensus required for the ban and funding for foreskin regeneration. I don't know if that kind of confrontation is going to do what you think it's going to do. I just don't. It might. I guess it depends how you do it, but I would be skeptical. So many famous intellectually Jewish people from a certain generation seem to have grown up in the same Brooklyn neighborhood. Yeah, that's why, I mean, he said Jewish ghetto, but like he wasn't wrong. So I don't see how that's necessarily wrong. I guess you can overstate it, right? Because it's not like Murray Rothbard and Murray Bookchin and all those people, they're the totalitarian of libertarianism, because they're not. And if you look at like the 5 most popular libertarians or the most influential, they aren't from the same neighborhood. But 4 of the 5 are Jewish. They're just from different places. I don't know what an ANCAP is. So an ANCAP is short for anarcho-capitalist. So most libertarians are what you would probably call a minarchist. They believe in a small government or the constitutional government. And then you have other libertarians who believe that the best type of society, or the most ideal or the most libertarian society, is a society that does not have a state at all. So not a minarchy, not a small state, but an anarchy, a no state. And so that, if right now markets and capitalism are providing our food and our computers and our cars and our books and most of our consumer goods and a lot of our other goods and services, anarcho-capitalists would say that capitalism and free market should supply all of our goods and services, whether it's defense, legal things, restitution, arbitration, healthcare, all everything. So that's what an ANACAP is, and the term was coined by Murray Rothbard back in, I think, the 1950s. Murray Rothbard has coined the name Mr. Libertarian. He's an influential libertarian theorist. Not an anarchist at all. I'm a capitalist, but very against crony capitalists letting government control and regulate, etc. Well, we agree on that, so we don't have to argue about that because we agree. Yeah, I found you interesting. Well, that's the best. That is the best compliment that I can get. Right? If people can listen to me, that's nice to know. If you're interested, though, I have a lot of videos. If you go back, most of my early videos were about gun control. I have lots of videos about that, which you will probably agree with most of those. And then I kind of go into a lot of different anarcho-capitalists. How would defense work? How would the courts work? How would defense against criminals? How would defense against states? Right? These are interesting topics that people like to debate about. I also have some really good book recommendation videos. So if you look, I have a video called Best Libertarian Books and Best Libertarian Books 2, which I think are good ways to kind of get a rough overview of my philosophical bearings. Born and raised in Cali, class of 98, never showered in school, and remember a student being ridiculed in middle school for being uncut. Well, California has one of the lowest circumcision rates, so the odds in a communal showering setting that there's going to be one uncut kid are fairly low, but I'm sure it depends where in California you live. Hoppe isn't Jewish. Yeah, but Hoppe is not on the list of 5 most important libertarians. The 5 most important libertarians, probably, this is debatable, but are probably Milton Friedman, Murray Rothbard, Ayn Rand, F.A. Hayek, and Ludwig von Mises. Hoppe would be, because Hoppe is very much, Rothbard's student. I love Hoppe, and he is an important intellectual, but I don't think he's in the top 5. And yes, he's certainly not Jewish. We already have good pilot programs for parent-child interface strategies going, and results are pretty good. We are also doing aggressive college campus recruitment to gain foot soldiers in the fight. I like that idea too, and also because college people are, coming around to when they're going to have kids. So I think that that's really good. So that is a good idea, I think. Yeah, the difference between a minarchist and an anarchist is 3 months. That's the joke, but you have to read some Michael Huemer for that to happen. So in my worldview, if a meteor were to strike Washington, D.C. tonight and only kill the legislators, congressmen, and worthless government employees, etc., I wouldn't feel bad. Where do I fall? Well, I'd say you're 90% of the way there. You just got to work on the last 10%. How long did it take you to go from minarchist to anarchist? It was a very slow process for me. I was a minarchist before I knew the term minarchist. I would say that by like 8th grade, I was strongly suspicious of government and saw it as potentially tyrannical, and thought that its activities should be somewhat limited. By the end of high school, I thought it should be fairly limited. And it was probably my sophomore year in college that I became an anarcho-capitalist, after listening to Hans Hermann Hoppe get interviewed by Scott Horton, actually. I know Walter Block and Bernie Sanders were friends. Alan Dershowitz, O.J. Simpson's lawyer, grew up in some Brooklyn neighborhood with some famous Jewish commie. Well, Dershowitz, I have mixed feelings about him. He's good on guns. He's terrible on Zionism. Uh, they were on the same track team. I wonder if they took communal showers together. Which non-libertarian, non-anarchist intellectual do you respect the most? Well, I would. I think he could be called a libertarian, but he might not call himself a libertarian. But Thomas Sowell. Um, who else? I think he could be called a libertarian though. Who's alive? Is this someone who's alive or in the past? Milton Friedman wasn't a libertarian though. Influenced many, but not a libertarian. Well, we could just substitute David Friedman for Milton Friedman, and that would solve that problem. Bernie wasn't much of a runner. Except for running for president. Wah, wah, wah. Okay. Hayek really isn't a libertarian. People just know his name. Again, this is debatable. David Friedman was a famous, influential libertarian. Absolutely, that's true. And I will be seeing him at PorcFest next week. So if anyone wants to go to PorcFest next week, come say hi and meet David Friedman. Kotkin is Stephen Kotkin or Kotkin the Third. He's dead. The guy who coined agorism. Sowell is a conservative. Yes, that's a debatable point. Um, his ideas are quite libertarian unless we're talking about the military, and then he's quite not libertarian. But I do respect him a lot. Can I cheat and look at my books? I mean, there's definitely authors that I like who are not libertarians. Like Stephen Kotkin's not a libertarian. Ian Tull's not a libertarian. Um, Arthur Herman, I don't think is a libertarian, although he seems like he's kind of close. And I've loved Arthur Herman's books. I don't know. I mean, you could even say someone like Aristotle's not a libertarian. You know, kind of libertarian-ish, but not really. Um, you psyched for Conceived in Liberty, Volume 5? I am actually. I don't know if I ever finished the other 4 volumes. I know I read the first 1 or 2. I'm not sure I finished all of them, though. My only issue is that it's not going to match the other ones that I have. Like the volumes, it's going to look different. Yeah, Gabriel Coco is a good non-libertarian writer for libertarians. Absolutely, that's true. Triumph of Conservatism is a great book. And also Railroads and Regulations is also a great book by him. Let's see, who else? Not Ben Burgess. He's boring and stupid. Putting me on the spot. One of the main organizers of PorcFest wanted me to come and speak about very anti-circumcision strategies I talked about here. He thought that the cultural jamming aspects of it would be appealing. Huh. How come PorcFest has not reached out to me to talk about this? God damn it. Gene Epstein debated a, quote, libertarian Zionist. Do you find this position at all in alignment with the ideology of libertarianism? Well, I didn't see this debate, and so I can't speak for the actual ideology of that person, whoever it was. Zionism as it exists now, I don't think is libertarian at all. However, there are hypothetical forms of Zionism that are fine, right? If voluntary Zionism, say Jews are just moving there, they're buying the land through private property, they're using persuasion, they're not forming a state and fucking nakbaing and expelling everyone who doesn't agree with them, that's not okay, and that's what Zionism is. That's what it became. Now, not all Zionists believed in that. Zionism has a rich ideological history. They didn't all agree. It ended up going down a certain way, and the way it went down was definitely not libertarian. All right, um, with the terrorism, with that, and but it could have been. There are ways it could have been better, and there are ways it could have been more libertarian. I mean, look at me. I am doing like a Zionism for the Free State Project, right? I'm moving to New Hampshire, and I'm trying to influence New Hampshire to become, a more libertarian friendly place. I'm not going to the people who live here already and saying, listen, you motherfuckers, this is going to be a libertarian dictatorship. And you either leave or you're going to submit and become second class citizens to a libertarian dictatorship. I'm not saying that. I would never say that. That's what ultimately ended up happening with Zionism. Now, not all Zionists agreed with that. Not all Jews believe that even now. But that's how it ultimately went down. You should do a lecture on foreskin restoration. You're an e-celebrity in that scene now. Yeah, I think I'm getting to that point. Oh, wow. Block is really bad about Zionism. He thinks Jews have an ancient claim to Israel, so they should get it. Yeah, I have heard some of the dumbest, like the absolute dumbest shit about Zionism based on this. And the worst I ever heard was from Charlie Kirk. And Charlie Kirk, he says taxation is theft. He has a lot of libertarian talking points. He's quick on his feet. He smashes the libs. He owns the libs. And I saw him. He was taking questions, and somebody said something about the Golan Heights, and he said, "Oh, you mean um, the Israeli reclaiming of the Golan Heights?" And the guy was like, "Reclaiming? How are they reclaiming it? They're just taking it from Syrians." And he said, "Oh no, there are like there are like ancient ruins of synagogues from 2,000 years ago in the Golan Heights." And I'm like, if you think because there are 2,000-year-old ruins that the state of Israel can then just go and take that land, that's the most stupid, retarded thing I have ever heard. Like if by that logic, when Mussolini invaded Albania or Greece or Libya or Egypt, he wasn't wrong because there are Roman ruins in all those places that are 2,000 years old. And Mussolini could just say, "Oh no, we're not invading these countries. We're just reclaiming them because they used to be Roman, and I'm Roman, right?" The connection between Mussolini and the Romans is no less ridiculous than the connection between the Zionist Jewish state of today and the Israel the kingdom of the Jews in the Bible or whatever, the kingdom of David or any of that. So that was just one of the dumbest things, and I couldn't believe somebody who is clearly intelligent and clearly well read on so many topics could say something so blatantly stupid. I'm still flabbergasted by it. Sorry, guys, I'm getting behind on the questions. Let me scroll back here. I'm not promoting Marxism or poor people revolting, but do you think getting out in the street as part of a mass protest and finding females who share similar ideals is good for males? I'm not the person to ask, but sure. That doesn't sound. I don't see anything in that I would disagree with, right off the cuff. You should do a lecture on foreskin restoration. You're an e-celebrity. Steven, you should contact the people at Porkfest and be like, "Hey, I know it's spur of the moment, but you should have this guy talk about it. I heard he's game and he knows what he's talking about." I could probably tell the guy about you. Hey, if you want to say, "Hey, I can't go, but I know somebody else who might be able to do it," sure, let him know. there's, Zionism makes a lot of smart Jews stupid. Like, there's a lot of really smart Jews who I respect and I listen to. I'm like, wow, that's very smart. And then they talk about Zionism. I'm like, you're a fucking idiot. Like, and this is a thing that like someone like Norman Finkelstein, and it's kind of the opposite too, right? Then there are other Jews, like these left-wing Jews, who are wrong about everything except for Zionism, right? So Norman Finkelstein is wrong about almost everything except for Zionism. And his there's a real famous video of him. It's called the Crocodile Tears speech, where some girl's like, you're talking about Nazis," and he's like, "I don't fucking cry your crocodile tears for me." But that it's just very strange. And what Finkelstein says, and I think this is correct, and I've run this past Israelis and they agree as well. A lot of American Jews fetishize Israel. They love the idea of Israel. They talk about it. They defend it. They defend Zionism. But like, none of them move there. Like, they live in New York and they love it. Like, Jews have never had it so good as they've had it in the United States. It's so much better here for Jews than it is in Israel because they don't have a draft. They don't have to deal with the fucking kibbutz or Likud. They don't have to deal, like, the right wing in Israel is worse than the right wing here, and the left wing in Israel is way worse than the left wing here. And so, like, if you're a conservative, moderate, religious Jew and you live in the United States, you've got it fucking made. There's nothing, but they fetishize it like crazy. It's nauseating. No, we're talking about Israel. Now all of a sudden everyone wants to talk. God is not a real estate agent, Ryan Dawson. 100% correct. That's just so stupid. And if you believe that, you have to understand that other people are not going to buy that. And that's not going to be a persuasive argument with anybody. Also, fucking so many Zionists are secular atheists that they can go fuck themselves if they're going to start talking about the Bible. But. I don't think the Block is his son Jesus. I think he's highly recognized, but he also rubs a lot of people the wrong way. But, I think that they're being too sensitive because I think his humor is fine. Mussolini did nothing wrong. There are 4,000-year-old temples of Baal and or local gods and other Semitic peoples. Genetic testing shows the Lebanese are most closely related. I guess Israel belongs to Lebanon. No, it belongs to the descendants of the Khazars and the Ashkenazi white people. What about finding a date at the March for Life? That's probably not a bad place to look. Do you have more tolerable discussions on libertarian issues with liberal, progressives, or Marxists? It's funny because the Marxists and the libertarians tend to agree on certain things and they can find common enemies, and so they can kind of reconcile over that. But then when it comes to strict theory, it completely breaks down into like you were completely wrong about everything, and vice versa. An effective form of activism would probably be handing out information to expectant mothers. Handing out information and showing them videos of circumcision. I've seen this done. I saw a clip where these people, they interviewed about a dozen people. What do you think about circumcision? And all of them were like, yeah, it's fine. I think it's good. And then they just showed them a video of a circumcision, and all of them were like, I don't know. I thought that was excellent activism. Blah, blah. I'm way, way behind. So many smart Jews are Marxists. Finkelstein killed Dershowitz in his debate. Yeah, I've read Finkelstein's books. One of them's called Chutzpah, Refuting Dershowitz. And I guess I should be fair. And look, I like Dershowitz. Dershowitz great on like gun rights and about like innocent until proven guilty and how you should have the best lawyer to defend yourself against the government. Like he's beautiful about a lot of that stuff. And then you have him start talking about Israel, and he just goes off the deep end so quick. Jews have a strong in-group preference, yes, because they don't want to be intimidated by foreskins and realize that they're mutilated and they're missing half their sexual pleasure. This is still live, yes. Finkelstein slaughtered Alan Dershowitz and exposed Dershowitz's plagiarisms of Time Immortal. Yeah, so I agree. I think that Finkelstein did a good job of showing that Time Immortal is plagiarized, but it's plagiarized in minor details, and so I feel like it's true he should hark on it, and he got the worst of that unfairly because of the political power of Dershowitz. But I think that there are better arguments against Zionism than saying, Dershowitz made up some shit in his book, or he took some stuff that was made up in his book. When I started at Loyola New Orleans, some libertarians advised others not to take Bloch's courses. David Friedman refuses to debate him. He is shunned by highbrow libertarians. Is that really true, though? I mean, okay, so David Friedman won't debate him, but like all the people at the Mises Institute seem to get along with him just fine, and I don't know that they're not highbrow. Uh, and there's some acrimony between David Friedman and Milton and Murray Rothbard, which is really funny because they look very similar. Like they look very, very similar. And it's kind of translated into this to the acolytes of Rothbard. And there's also I think there's a little bit of jealousy on the part of Friedman. Not that he's a bitter, jealous figure. I wouldn't say that, but Milton Friedman he has more stature in popular culture. He's got the Nobel Prize and whatnot, but the Mises Institute has been killing it on popularizing the ideas of Rothbard, like just killing it. And so the number of people who have read Rothbard is probably a lot greater than the number of people who have read, say, Milton Friedman's books, which, if nothing else, is probably just a testament that Rothbard was a very good writer. It's not necessarily saying that all his ideas were perfect or whatever, because I don't think that's true. But I always captured a little bit of resentment there, because I've seen people bring that up to David, and he'll be like, well, it's not a fair comparison because the Mises Institute is like giving that shit out for free. Like they're PDFing it and getting people to get it for free, or they're selling the books at cost. And I was like, okay, well then your dad should have his own, right? I mean, Milton Friedman deserves to have his own fucking institute or whatever. Probably does somewhere, and they should be giving his books away. But you got to give Lou Rockwell credit, man. Mises's wife said, I will not let you have a institute with my husband's name unless you swear that you will dedicate your life to his ideas. And like, it seems quite clear that Lou Rockwell has done that, and has done an exceedingly good job. And they're punching way above their weight in terms of influence, I would say. I'm sick of U.S. politics being used to hash out 4,000-year-old Semitic blood feuds. Yeah, we should totally just not be involved. Like Israel does nothing for us, and none of those states. Like it's just a huge shit show that we shouldn't be involved in. And we get a lot of shit for it too. This is Michael Shermer's great, and Ray McGovern and all the blowback people. Our support of Israel pisses a lot of people off, and we should just wash our hands of it and be like, you know what? You have nukes. You're fine. You don't need our help. Say what you will about Zionism, but the Jewish state has shown its ability to defend itself, and it can mop the floor with all of its neighbors, and it has repeatedly. It has second strike capabilities, right? They have nuclear submarines with ICBMs. So fuck, they don't need our help. Debate being gay. There's no debate. It's the only way. Something I have always thought to myself is that while conservatives can defend capitalism instinctively, it takes libertarian to defend it intellectually and accurately. What do you think? I think this is totally true. In fact, I actually think that conservatives have very little in terms of coherent ideology. There are conservative thinkers, so people like Russell Kirk and Robert Nisbet and a few others, but their ideas, like conservatism, is kind of a nonsensical idea. It's just whatever is should be preserved just because. And so Social Security was wrong until it was established, and then it became right, basically. And so there are a lot of conservatives who are quite smart and can be quite eloquent, but when they are most eloquent and most persuasive, they are directly drawing on libertarian arguments and libertarian thinkers. So all of the rhetorical, when Charlie Kirk is quote smacking the libs or Ben Shapiro is crushing the libs, he is almost always relying on libertarian arguments, almost always. So And I find that really frustrating. Like, oh, libertarians are these fringe and no one cares. But like when conservatives want to debate liberals, that's what they do. And now, what's even weirder now is like with abortion, when pro-choice people are trying to debate their point, they're also taking libertarian arguments because the pro-choice arguments are so abysmally terrible. Ever thought about debating Sam Sater? I've thought about it, but not seriously. Tactical anarcho-capitalism. Hey guys, I'm really thirsty. I will be right back in like 30 seconds. Sorry about that. Have I ever read anything by Henry Kissinger? No. Rothbard has a great letter to Frank Meyer shredding conservatism. Conservatism is like, again, they're looking back and conserving things in the past. And some of the stuff in the past is good, but there's no coherent connection, right? And some of the stuff in the past is bad. I used to really be into like Russell Kirk because he lived by me. He's from this very small town in Michigan that I was really familiar with, and he was this fairly significant figure in the he wrote the Conservative Mind and the Foundations of American Power. Um, but it's really not a coherent ideology. I just wish the government could leave us alone. But Chance, you have to understand that the reason states exist, there is this great misconception, that's belief that like, yes, markets are good at solving lots of problems, but there's certain problems that only the government can solve. And I don't think that's true, but let's just say hypothetically that that is true. That maybe defense can't be handled except by the government, or maybe the government handles it best. Let's say that. There's this belief that the reason states came about is we had societies, and we had these problems that we couldn't solve except for government. So we came together and we said, let's create a government to solve these problems that we can't solve through any other means. And one of the things that's stupid about that is that's not how it happened. Like, as far as we know about the formation of the first states, it's not that the people all got together and said, we have problems that we can't solve, let's form a government to solve those problems. It was much more an act of extortion, aggression, taxation, coercion, where you get the gradual development of elites, people who, oh, thanks, Chance. You get the gradual development of elites in alluvial depositional plains, right? In areas where you have irrigation agriculture specifically, and they would go and say, okay, you are now going to pay me taxes. I'm going to extort a certain amount of money from you, or else I will punish you through death, or I will kick you out, or whatever else. And then I will use the extortion to not only aggrandize myself, but then to bribe, cohorts to get a class of people who are invested in my rule. And then I'll also make up excuses as to why this is justified. I'll say, well, I'm doing it because it's good for you, or because the gods ordained it. But there is no evidence that states formed because people got together and created them to solve problems that they couldn't solve another way. So what's the point of me saying that? The idea that the government's going to leave you alone is completely wrong. Governments formed because it was in the self-interest of those who govern. It's for them. I mean, initially, like old school states, it was for just having resources and then also having like reproductive rights. So you'd have the king and he'd have a harem and he could have hundreds or thousands of children, which a normal person couldn't. And he could be rich and he could have status, right? Humans have an innate desire for status. And that's what it was really about. And the stuff about providing the goods and services or having some kind of role in society. All of that was window dressing to dress up what was actually happening. I have a topic I would like you to chat about regarding a vintage steam bath that opened with men's nights and ladies' nights. Where can I send you a story if interested? You can just post it in the comments here. If you post it in the comments here, I'll be able to see it if it's just a link. So go ahead and do that. And if it doesn't allow in the chat, wait until the video is posted, which will be later tonight, and just post it in the comments of this video. And I'll take a look at it. I'm kind of curious what a vintage bathhouse would be. Only government was willing to cover the first cost of nuclear energy, the space program, or the internet. That presumes that those things had to be done, or that was the best way to do it, right? The government can subsidize anything it wants, but that doesn't mean that subsidy is justified, right? So they could say, we want to build a bridge across the Bering Sea, right? The government says, we're going to build a bridge from Alaska to Russia. And that potentially could have benefits. In fact, there's no question that it would have some benefits. Would those benefits justify the cost of doing so? Well, not necessarily. And in fact, if it doesn't make profit, if it's not something that can make money equal to the cost of doing it, then it wasn't a good idea to do. So, yes, these things are good things, but they come at a cost, and the government subsidizing is not evidence that they needed to be subsidized. Oh, wow, the questions are getting too long now. I know Jazz Jennings has had a sex change, and I'm not saying I'm against that, but do you think maybe that was not needed for her to be happy? I don't know who Jazz Jennings is, so I can't say. Do you remember Blithering Genius? I had a debate with him that boiled down to me saying that proto-cities were anarchist and him denying that. I saw you had a similar discussion with him in the YouTube comments. I don't remember him. So yeah, the first permanent settlements, so Çatalhöyük, the Tripolian societies in the Ukraine, there's a couple examples of this. As best as we can tell, were stateless. Right? We don't see any hierarchy. The remains are pretty egalitarian. There's no real evidence of central control or elites or anything like that. And those are the first large settlement. We're talking about a couple thousand, 4,000 or 5,000 people in those situations. It's really not until Uruk or maybe Jericho that you get stuff where it seems possible that there are states, but not possible, but not necessarily the case, right? Just because there's a local elite, an elite doesn't necessarily make one a state. And actually, what is that book? I did a video on it. It's called like The Harvest of Sorrow. No, that's about the famine. But basically, we know that they had irrigation agriculture for 4,000 or 5,000 years before they had states, right? So it was a very, very gradual process. It took a very long time to happen. Basically, a way to look at states is they're a type of parasitic crime, right? They're a type of extortion that initially was only possible in very, very certain environments. You had to have fixed communities, you had to have settled agriculture, but not just settled agriculture. You had to have crops that yielded at predictable times and that could be cost effectively taxed. So things like potatoes or squash, things that were underground, were very difficult to do this. So really basically corn, or not corn, well, corn later in North America, but wheat, barley, legumes. And yeah, if states are just a good way to solve problems, then they should have sprung up everywhere at the same time and not in just these very limited areas. Now, once you started getting like money economies, states can function, in broader context. Have you read Butler Schaefer? Yes. Boundaries of Order is a good book, and Restraint of Trade is also a good book. Butler Schaefer is a very lucid author, and I highly recommend people read. The basic gist of his argument is that property rights are not some intellectual development or some creation, that they are just a natural part of the world. And another good book to go with that is called The Territorial Imperative, which is not by Butler Schaefer, it's by somebody else, but that's a good book. What's your favorite book on the origins of states? One sec. Sorry. Yeah, I did a review on this, but this is a good book on that. Against the Grain by James Scott. So if anyone is interested in a libertarian or anarchist perspective on the first states, this is actually quite a good book on that topic. Oh, guys, I'm like way behind. Holy shit, I'm gonna have to run through these. Yeah, I get it. I'm a very healthy guy. I don't smoke, I don't drink, but not a lot. But I do enjoy marijuana edibles and privacy of my own home. I just wish government would let me enjoy my downtime. Yep, they should. It's a moral outrage that they don't let you do that as much as they don't. Didn't you argue before that states were created by people engaged in animal husbandry, invading people who used farming? So that is a common theory. If you go back to Franz Oppenheimer and the state, that was his theory. This was the idea that you'd have agriculturalists, and they would get raided by pastoralists, and the pastoralists would establish states, and that is still one of the arguments people make. That certainly did happen in our earliest historical records. It does seem that many of the dynasties in antiquity that we know about, there's evidence that that's what they were, including the Egyptian society. So if you know the iconography of the pharaohs, you know the pharaohs are depicted with a crook and a shepherd's crook and a flail, which are pastoralist weapons. And similar, I think the Kassites, which were longtime rulers of the Babylonians, there's good evidence that was the case with them. I think he talks about it in Against the Grain also. It could be wrong, but it's definitely in Oppenheimer's book as well, that the pastoralists have certain martial advantages over agricultural people. They're more active, and they have better cohesion, and I don't know, maybe they take communal showers together, I don't know, but they seem to be better fighters. There's evidence of this even like in more contemporary societies, like in Africa. So like the Tutsis versus the Hutus, for instance. So this is a theory that hasn't been proven but seems plausible. In which case, this I think it's sometimes called the conquest theory. So you have a society that's stateless, it's an anarchy, and basically they get raided, and eventually the raiders just say, "Hey, we're just formally making this a thing. You're just going to pay us, 20% every year, and that's just how it's going to be." Uh, Yeah, just go ahead, Pierre Benoit. Just wait until I post the video, which it automatically does it once I'm done, but it can take an hour or two before it's up. But it'll certainly be up by tomorrow. And just place it in the comments then, and I'll take a look. Economic analysis suggests the Manhattan Project paid for itself, increased activity and production by the early 1950s. That's not the standard, right? Just because something turned out doesn't mean it had to be done, right? And this is just government did something and there was a benefit there, therefore it had to be done. It didn't have to be done. And those resources, we don't know, like the resources that went into the Manhattan Project, what would they have been used for if the government had never taken them? right? This economic analysis that you're talking about, does that take into effect the opportunity cost? The Manhattan Project cost, I think it cost about $1 billion along those lines. The B-29 program, by the way, cost $3 billion. So if that money had never been taxed and had left in private hands, what would have been the return on investment on that? Right? Are you saying that the Manhattan Project was a better return on investment and in increased economic activity and production than the $1 billion if it had been spent by the market? No, I don't think so. Like, if you're saying, well, the government spent $1 billion on the Manhattan Project and they got $1,100,000,000 back in the 1950s, so therefore it was justified. No, because if that money had stayed in the private market and they would have made double that amount of money by the 1950s, then that was fucking stupid. You gotta, when you're looking at the government, you always have to bear in mind the opportunity cost. They took that money. This is broken window fallacy, Basquiat 101. They took that money away from the private sector, and it's not like the private sector was gonna burn it, which the Manhattan Project, like, they didn't just burn it, they fucking incinerated it along with 100,000 people, which, by the way, is the activity worth that as well? Not a stupid question, if you ask me. Against the Grain by James C. Scott. Yep, that's the one. Taxes were ties, and the first justification for states were religious. This is a claim. There's an anthropologist who claims this, but I don't think this is demonstrated or proven. He's just assuming it's true, and I don't think that's actually correct. I really don't. That is an opinion, but it's not necessarily true. They had agriculture before they had states. Yeah, this is something people don't understand. First of all, people think that sedentism, you had agriculture and then sedentism. Sedentism predates agriculture for sure. So we had cities like Çatalhöyük that weren't really practicing agriculture, or the Tripolitan civilization in Ukraine, and many others examples actually. And then agriculture came later. Basically, the stresses of having a permanent settlement made them use the surrounding areas in more intensive ways, and that kind of generated advancement in agriculture. So then you have agriculture, and then you have thousands of years of agriculture, and indeed, not states didn't arise in dry farming agricultures like in Europe, but in heavily irrigated areas. But even there, it took 3,000-4,000 years before that happened. Jazz Jennings was the world's youngest transgender person and kind of American sweetheart or whatever. She was a cute kid, and supposedly the surgery was really difficult for her. I don't know anything about her. Yes, preventing the deaths of hundreds of thousands of U.S. soldiers and 1 million Japanese civilians with the atom bomb alone was worth it. Okay, Gregory Machuk, that is a highly contentious claim. Okay, because the Japanese were trying to surrender before they dropped the atom bomb. Now, the atom bomb being dropped was a huge controversial event, and after the war, and there were people like Eisenhower, MacArthur, who said it was not necessary, did not have to be done. Henry Stimson, who was the Secretary of War, just wrote in his autobiography after the war, well, we had to do it because if we didn't do it, 1 million Americans would have died in the invasion in Japan. Hey, we want to surrender since 1944. And they were, can we keep the emperor? And the Americans said no. They still ask, this is unconditional surrender, but we would like to keep the emperor, please. And Harry Truman said, I deem this acceptable. They accept the surrender. And they let them keep the emperor. Fucking Hirohito remained the emperor of Japan until he died in 1989. His son became the emperor after that, and he's just now retiring. That's Akihito. So there's pretty strong evidence the main reason they dropped the bomb was to threaten the Soviets. They wanted to do a test. They'd spent $1 billion. They wanted to see what the damage it would do on a city. They'd done the test in Alamogordo, but that was just in the desert. They wanted to make a demonstration to fucking frighten the Soviets, right? So FDR had been Uncle Joe's best friend, a fucking communist sympathizer, totally delusional, derelict president, the worst president we've ever had, if you ask me. Worse than Wilson, worse than Lincoln, the worst president we've ever had. A literal traitor, a treasonous motherfucker, and he packed his administration with pro-Soviet hacks. Truman comes in. Now a lot of anti-Soviets come out of the woodwork, and they're like, holy shit, we just gave half of Europe to Stalin. We have this bomb. We need to fucking piss him off. We need to show him how strong we are. So they dropped the bomb on Japan. They did not do it to save American lives. It didn't save any American lives. The Japanese were already trying to surrender. All right. Now they were setting conditions, and the condition they were setting was that they keep the emperor, which we let them do. So the claim that they were there, that saved American lives, the numbers that you're quoting are just completely made up numbers. They're made up by people who were defending themselves after the war, when there's all this outcry. Hey, this is very questionable, including by high-ranking General MacArthur is not some idiot, right? He's not some pacifist either. He's not a libertarian. Just this was not necessary. If they wanted to make a demonstration, fine. Drop it in the fucking ocean, right? Invite the Soviets to the beach in Kamchatka or whatever, and say, hey, get all your scientists and just watch, you motherfuckers. And they could have dropped it in the ocean or whatever and scared the fuck out of them. No, it got real because this is really infuriating. We're going to say, oh, the cost-benefit analysis, and we're doing this to grow money. And yes, we saved 1 million lives. They didn't save 1 million lives. Not 1 million Japanese and not 100,000 Americans or 1 million Americans. Okay? The Japanese were already trying to surrender. They were just setting one condition, that we allow them to keep the emperor, which we did. So they did not need to do that. Yeah, and that's the other thing. You bring up a good point. I thought the Japanese surrendered because they preferred to be occupied than the U.S. instead of the USSR. So this isn't certain, but this also detracts from the idea that we needed to drop the bomb. They were trying to surrender before the bombs were dropped. Again, conditionally keeping the emperor. The bombs dropped on Hiroshima. Before the bomb is dropped on Nagasaki, fucking Soviet Union invades Manchuria. A huge invasion, and they basically wipe out the Japanese army in Manchuria was called the Kwangtung Army. It had 1 million soldiers, so this is a large army. It had been in Manchuria at that point for 15 years, and the Soviets just annihilated it in the course of a couple weeks. And now it looks like the Soviets are going to overrun Manchuria, overrun China, overrun North Korea, and the Japanese, they're probably like, holy shit, like, we have to make a choice. Yeah, but no. Sure, the government spends trillions of dollars, and I'm sure you could say, oh yeah, this did the benefit and this did the benefit. But again, I asked you a question. What about the opportunity costs? Right now, you added this claim that like, oh, it saved all these lives, and I think that that's a bullshit claim, and I explained why. And your comment here is not refuting any of that. But again, it's not like if the government taxes $1 billion and then spends it, and we say, oh look, here's $1 billion worth of stuff that the government made. Now, of course, 500 million of that's going to get wasted by the government in bureaucratic fiction. So you're going to get taxed $1 billion, and they're going to give you a $500 million piece of junky infrastructure, and then we're all supposed to go like, oh, thank you so much. You're so great. What would we ever do without you? And then, of course, that it completely ignores, again, Basquiat 101, broken window. They took $1 billion from the society, and that it's not like the society was just going to waste it, and it was going to get invested. It was going to be putting towards making people's lives better, towards more houses, more bedrooms, more factories, whatever. And you're just looking at it and saying, well, let's just look at what the government turned out at the end and ignore what would have been created without it, which we don't know what it would be, but we know that would have been adding value to people's lives because that's how people spend it. I mean, if this is the logic, then the government should just take all the money, right? If the government knows what's best for everybody better than they do, when government spends money, it's wiser than the way the people would spend it themselves, then they should just have control of all the money. Income taxes should be 100%. All of our wealth, right? If government is this magnifier of wealth, and if we give them $1 billion in taxes, we get you know, at least $1 billion back, but more, then we should just give them everything, and then that will make the economy better, and we'll all be better off. No, it's the opposite. They waste the money, right? Just even if they're not, even if you assume that they're not corrupt, that they're not malignant, that they're not trying to aggrandize themselves, even if you make all these assumptions that they're benevolent, like the information about what's the best way to spend money to satisfy the needs of people is not something that you can look up on the internet. It's diffused among the populace, right? We have 310 million people in the United States. Each one of them has their ideas about what's best for them, and the government is not privy to all that. I intend to force the federal government to fund adult pluripoint stem cell based foreskin regeneration. But when you say force the government, you mean force other people to do it, because the government is only going to get its money from other people. Do you think a large part, if not all, of our energy sector would be nuclear if the government had stayed out of the sector? Uh, I don't know. Like the EPA has basically made it impossible to build new nuclear power plants. And to Jared's point, we don't really know how costly it would be, right? If people were allowed to develop these technologies, the chances are they would become increasingly less expensive. Which is not to say we would have, there's that joke in Back to the Future where he says, "I'm sure in 1986 you can get plutonium at the local gas station." I don't think we would be at that point yet, but it would probably not be as expensive as it was initially. But now after watching Chernobyl, nobody's ever going to want that to happen. Between Chernobyl and Fukushima. Dude, we just did a whole video on communal showers. So you wear nothing. You go and you shower naked with all your buddies. End of story. Then you free ball on your way home. Is that even a question? Yes, I view the entire country as collaborators in the genital mutilation of infant boys. What about people who never did it or never paid for it? I mean, if everyone is a collaborator, it's only because they are taxed by the government, and then the government subsidizes it with Medicaid or Medicare, which it shouldn't be doing, right? I mean, we can 100% get on board that. I'm against these programs for anything, but for elective surgeries like circumcision, they definitely should not be paid for. But I am then not going to condemn the people who are taxed to pay for that, right? This is like, oh, we can just kill the civilians in another country because their taxes support the government in those countries. This is the Ayn Rand, we could just kill everyone in Iran kind of view. I just don't believe in that kind of collectivism. It's not necessarily people's fault that they're getting taxed. Now, some people are asking for it and demanding it, and those people are more culpable than the people who either didn't vote or voted against something happening. And this, you're talking about collective guilt here, right? There's people in the United States who never circumcise anybody, who have never spent any money to get circumcised, and they never popularized it, so I wouldn't blame those people. Now, if you want to blame the parents who decide to get it done, I'm on board with that. If you want to blame the doctors who do it, I'm totally on board with that. If you want to blame the hospitals where it's done, I'm on board with that. If you want to charge the mohels who do it, I'm on board with that. If you want to if you want to talk to the medical schools about misinformation, I'm on board with that. There's a long way we can go, but just to say everybody, no. No. So silence, I agree that silence is not a good thing. It's not helping solve the problem, but that doesn't make you guilty. Right? This is the equivalent of like saying, if you didn't resist the Nazis, you're like the Gestapo. No, that you're not the Gestapo if you didn't resist the Nazis. It's not that simple. It's not that black and white. Not for any issue, and certainly not for this issue. A good book on this, Jared, if you're interested, is The Economics of Scientific Research by, here, let me grab it. Couldn't find it. It's called The Economics of Scientific Research by Terence Keeley. It's a really good book on how subsidies of science don't really do anything on that. If I am privy to a felony happening, I can be held responsible for not doing anything to report it. Silence can be criminal. Silence can be, but I think you are getting way off here because, just I like so. I'm sitting in my room right now. I know there are circumcisions going on somewhere in the United States. First of all, they're not felonies. It's wrong. It should be wrong, but legally they're not felonies. Two, I don't know specifically about any going on. So, like, am I guilty because there's some going on right now and I'm not going out and attacking the parents? They're going on right now, and what are you doing? You're commenting on a YouTube video, but that's not stopping the felony from happening. So again, I don't think that follows. And I understand that this is an outrageous issue and that it really is emotional for a lot of people. It's very emotional for me. I understand the outrage, and it's difficult because most of the people in the society don't see it that way, and they trivialize it, and they're very flippant about it, and they're critical of it, and they say you're fucked up and you're weird and it's wrong for you to feel this way. So I understand why it's frustrating, but I think you're going way too far in your allegations here. Have any of your books appreciated in value? I don't keep track, so I don't know. Probably not. The one that might have gone up in value is called Pieces of Eight, which is a history of what the Constitution says about the gold standard, and that was quite an expensive book, and it's rarely published. The author of that book is super anal about not publishing it, so that one's probably gone up. It was $200 when I bought it, and it could be more than that now. And then the other one would be Anthony C. Sutton's book, Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development. Although somebody told me there's PDFs of that now circulating around. That took me about 8 years to get all 3 volumes of that, and I spent like over $100 on every issue. But when I first was looking for it on like Amazon, like one volume of it was $1,500. Do you think government giving out cash rewards would be good? I think that would be fairly beneficial. No, for two reasons. One, cash rewards for what? Are they just going to give out a cash rewards for everything? And if they're not going to give it out for everything, how are they going to decide? And it might seem simple, like, well, a cure for cancer or whatever, but there's like literally millions of things it could be, and the fact that it's one and not another. The other thing is, again, the whole broken window fallacy. Let's say they did give out a cash reward, but what about if they never taxed that money in the first place? Uh, your Russian one, right? It's called Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development by Anthony C. Sutton. Okay, Gregory, I totally get your passion. that doesn't mean that everyone else is guilty of a felony. It just doesn't. Because you're an activist doesn't mean everyone else is a criminal who doesn't go as far as you. And this was what was bothering me earlier when you were saying we're going to do terror tactics against people. That's just not going to work. I understand how angry you are, but if you just start coming out and saying you're an evil terrorist person, that's not going to get you anywhere. It's really not. If you just go up and start screaming at somebody, you're evil, they're not going to become a regret parent. They're just going to be like, you're a crazy person, and I'm not going to listen to you. And people will get their sons circumcised just to smite you, right? Just to spite you and say, fuck you, I can do what I want with my kid, and I'm going to circumcise them because I think you're crazy. Culture jamming. Well, okay, that's whatever you want to call it, but if you're going to confront people accusatorially, I don't think that that's going to help. Now, if you're going to say, okay, watch this video of a circumcision, that helps. You know, your baby's perfect. Your son is born perfect. He doesn't need an elective surgery. You know, men who are uncircumcised enjoy their foreskins. There's no reason to assume your son won't be the same. Here's a video. Just bear in mind, you should not do this flippantly. You should have a good reason. You want to protect him. It's his choice. But it's weird, you know, so like a lot of libertarians think the idea that it's his body, his choice that has a lot of relevance. Chance, you didn't get missed. I said, go naked to the communal showers and then free ball on your way home. Boom. So, yeah, acting like PETA. People's intuitions on circumcision are so crazy. I asked someone at my school if they should be illegal to chop off babies' earlobes for religious purposes, and he said no, but he supports circumcision. Yes. It's just social proof and cultural bias. People just accept it because it's culturally done, and yeah. But just screaming at them that they're evil people is not going to change their mind. It would be like libertarians going around and saying everyone who's not a libertarian is a horrible person, and they're basically a Nazi. That just doesn't do anything. Well, if all you're saying is infant circumcision, I mean, that's fine. I have no problem with it against me. But you were earlier saying like cultural terror, and like infants, just saying infant circumcision is not cultural terror. There's other weird things about circumcision too, because if you said like I'm just gonna run onto a playground and abduct all the children who are uncircumcised and circumcise them, people would be like, oh my god, that's the creepiest, craziest thing you could possibly do. But I mean, that is basically what's happening. If you do it to a baby, they're like, oh, that's fine, you're doing a good job. The best way to get change on circumcision is just exposing the bad medical arguments. That's part of it, but I think the other part that really needs to happen is intact men need to speak out. Because right now you have a lot of pro-circumcision people saying foreskins are dirty, foreskins have no value, foreskins are gross, they cause disease, and they have no purpose. And so when people do the medical arguments, people will even admit like, well, the medical benefits are pretty small, but since there's no downside, you know, since the foreskin is worthless, literally, which is how most people think about it, if they're circumcised, that is, then it doesn't matter if the medical benefits are tiny, because a tiny medical benefit for no cost is fine. So if you come and say, actually, foreskin is really fucking nice, like, foreskin feels great, it has a function, it makes sex better, makes masturbation better, feels better for the woman, feels better for the man, it's not dirty, it's not hard to clean, it's not a risk factor worth mentioning. So actually, yeah, there is actually a cost. It's not to mention the cost of the trauma of inflicting the baby to the surgery, right? You're doing The scalpel in the room. Actually, so if we're talking about Jewish circumcision, it's not a scalpel; it's a thumbnail. The thumbnail in the room, because they use their thumbs to do it. Do you think the most pragmatic way towards a more ANCAP society would involve public property release into the market via shareholder grant or regions? So I don't know if it's the most pragmatic way, but I actually think that's a really good idea, and I think it's one of the because one of the big problems that doesn't get talked about that much is that the federal government owns so much land, a huge proportion of the land, especially out west. I think Nevada is the worst. I think the federal government owns 88% of Nevada, but it's like more than 50% in several of the western states. And I think there's two things they could do. They could, um, they could, they have all these liabilities like the Social Security, these things they can't afford to pay. I think they could go to people and be like, "Hey, how about instead of us paying your Social Security, we just give you like 100 acres, and then so they could dispose of the land in lieu of like payments towards people on Social Security, and just sell it that way, and then those people could sell the land, which is what the government used to do. They used to pay their soldiers that way." Um, Caught me off guard with the thumbnail. What the fuck? Okay, Ken Dog McAwesome. If you didn't know this, so in traditional Jewish circumcision, the first part, they pull the foreskin tight and they cut off, but you still have skin on the glands. And the skin, when you're born, when you're 8 days old, this is in traditional Jewish circumcision, it's done on the 8th day. The inner foreskin is fused to the head of the penis. They're attached. So if you're going to cut the foreskin off and you don't want to cut the head off, you have to get that off. Now, in a medicalized situation, they use a steel forceps and they go in there and they rip it off that way, and that's pretty bad. But a moil will use his thumb. He'll have a thumbnail and he'll peel the foreskin off the glands all the way around, and then that's how they'll cut it off. And if they're being real traditional, he'll bend down and he'll suck the blood out to cleanse the wound with his mouth and give the baby herpes. Spending all your time going down the rabbit hole of debunking the medical claims is a waste of time. Most people don't care about logic, use emotional warfare. Um, I don't think it's a waste of time. It's not the only thing that's going to work. I'm fine with using emotions, but just saying infant circumcision, it doesn't do much for emotions. I think showing them videos of it happening does, and so I think that's a good thing. Good night. Thanks, Chance. Thank you for coming by the channel. Always nice to have new. I don't know if you're a sub or not, but you've been good in the discussions. It's been interesting talking to you, and I appreciate your perspective. And so, thanks for coming by. I do appreciate it. I just assumed that you've been a subscriber for a long time. It's kind of weird to me that you've been watching these even though it's only been like a day or two. Yeah, I think the most effective thing that I've ever seen is just showing videos of the circumcision happening. Uh, and I've seen examples where people are very much in favor of circumcision. They see the video and all of a sudden they're extremely skeptical about it. And that's when they're talking about hypothetically and they're not talking about their own child. If suddenly like, oh, we're going to do this to your own child, whoa, that will make a lot of people think. And there's also good evidence that like doctors know this, and that's why they're so adamant that parents not watch, because they know they'll start screaming bloody murder. So I think Yeah, video and audio, very important. Uh, Revolutions are just kind of like they're shitstorms. You could end up being okay, you could end up making it way worse, and there's no way to tell. There's so much circumstantial that goes into how a revolution happens. A violent one especially that you know. The state. Well, first of all, Jared McIntyre, no particular state actually does last that long. If you aggregate all of them together, then yes, they've been around a long time and they're fairly persistent. But states do fail. All states fail eventually. We could call everyone who's in favor of circumcision literal Hitler. I'm pretty sure Hitler was against circumcision. The state, capital. We'll abolish the state through communal showers. Once we all communal shower together, we won't need the state because we'll all get along. Duh. Does your family know about your channel? I think they do. I don't think that they actually watch though. They're not YouTube aficionados, right? They get their news from CNN, so they're not going to be on here. All right, guys, I'm getting pretty tired. Any final questions? My parents are Democrats. My dad voted for Bernie, and then he voted for Hillary. I am 36. Coke. Did you confront your parents about over circumcision? No, I haven't. Did you have heated political discussions with your parents? Occasionally, but not frequently, not all the time. Have a good night. Nice to see the live stream again. Hope I've asked good questions, gotten a few good jokes, and night, y'all. Yep, thank you, Breakfast Libertarian. Have a good night. If I don't see you at PorcFest, too bad. But if I do, come say hi. Yeah, I do think parents do bear some responsibility, but I think that they're not doing it to be malicious. They just think they're doing what's right. Now they're wrong, but there's no malice. And also, it's in the past, right? You can go and do that, but they're not. I mean, it would be a little bit different if your parents were still having children. Like if I knew my parents were about to have another son, which is not possible at this point. But let's say I became an activist and they were still fertile and they were still pumping out kids. I would probably go and say, hey, don't do this. But they're not, and none of their friends are, right? All their friends are too old. So, um, getting angry at parents, I understand why people do it. I do, and if that's really how you feel for you to cope to talk to your parents, then that's okay. But I don't think it's gonna stop circumcisions. Maybe. I mean, it's possible that they could become regret parents and go out there and start crusading against it or whatever, or at least in polite discussion, be against it. And so it's not necessarily without value, but I don't think it's necessary. And again, I talked about this. I did a video with Poe the Person, and she said, parents do what they think is right, and they could be wrong, and they are wrong in the case of circumcision. Do you plan on abandoning your parents over this, as our libertarian master Stefan Molyneux indicates we should? Has he explicitly said you should abandon your parents if they circumcised you? That wouldn't surprise me. I saw him in a debate, and he talked about his uncircumcised penis, and it was honestly the first time in my life that I thought an uncircumcised penis was gross. Like, the thought of him having an uncircumcised penis almost made me, like, pro-circumcision. It was so disgusting. If I'm being totally honest. That is also a thing where he gives himself way too much credit. He says, I'm the best libertarian ever because I'm the only libertarian who talks about circumcision, which is just false. Would you use a scalpel against me? The scalpel against me argument. No, yeah, I'm familiar with defooing. I'm familiar with defooing. Yeah. His claim to fame. He doesn't still advocate it, does he? I feel like he's gotten so much shit for that he would just quietly kind of change his tune. Kind of like when he got all that shit for bitching about a $1 donation, and then he got one for 50 cents, and he was like, thank you so much, I really appreciate it, it's so nice. Like, what a fucking piece of shit. What a work. Yeah, I'm subscribed, but I don't watch his stuff anymore. Okay, here's another way of putting it. So, National Communist, you're very familiar with this person and their situation, and I don't know anything about them. Do you think that it is wrong to have negative feelings about a sex change? I don't think it's wrong to have negative feelings about a sex change. Defooing, now that's a term I haven't heard in a long time. I'm sorry to ruin the streak. What's worse, hearing the term defooing or hearing about a Jewish thumb ripping your foreskin off? Have you investigated the claim that foreskins are extremely valuable in cosmetics, which is why hospitals put them on parents? Well, so it is 100% true that foreskins are valuable in cosmetics, and they are used to make cosmetic products. I don't know what percentage of foreskins are used in this way. I don't think all of them, but some of them are. Is this the reason why doctors are pushing them? I think it is a partial reason, but not the main reason. I mean, there's financial interest, just the charge for the procedure, that's part of it. But I think it's much deeper than that. I think doctors who are themselves circumcised want to rationalize that it was done to them. If they've been doing them, they don't want, like, let's say you're a doctor and you've done 1,000 circumcisions, and then you suddenly decide that it wasn't a good idea. You become an intactivist, and you stop doing them. Well, if the families that you circumcise find out, they're going to be very angry with you and say, okay, wait a second. So you told us that this was necessary, that this is something we should have done. You encouraged us to do it, and then you did it. And now you're saying that it's not necessary and it shouldn't be done. They're going to be fucking pissed, and they're going to sue the hell out of you. And I've heard of this actually happening. Well, not part of it. Like one of the intactivists I listened to was saying that they know a doctor in Maine who he has sons who are intact, but he's circumcised. And he doesn't believe in circumcision. He doesn't think it's necessary, but he does it all the time. And so he has to be very careful that like his patients don't figure out that he didn't do it, because they're going to be like, why are you doing this? So they have this very, like, they would be exposing themselves to enormous liability if they came out and started saying, hey, this isn't necessary. We're performing an unnecessary surgery for cultural reasons. They are used for skin grafts in scientific research. Yeah. There's also interesting things like typically whenever tissue is removed in a hospital, they have to, it's a whole process where they have to bag it and they have to log it and they have to file paperwork, right? If they amputate your leg, your finger, or like even very small bits of tissue, and foreskin is just not treated that way. They often just throw it in the garbage. One of the there's a Doctors Against Circumcision who was saying that he started filing the paperwork saying, hey, well, let's treat this like we do other tissue, and they were just like, no, it's just a foreskin. Don't treat it that way. Just throw it away. Would you say that European Jews receiving reparations for the creation of the State of Israel is the only form of reparations that has worked for a group? Has it really worked? Like they live in Israel and they get drafted in the IDF, and I don't know. And I also don't know if they needed them, right? Would the State of Israel not exist if they didn't get money from Germany? This is actually a huge issue throughout conventional medicine in general. Though it's a tough call, watching a Molyneux video would be marginally preferable, not universally preferable, to a thumbnail under my foreskin, if only just. There's zero chance a doctor gets sued for losses for doing a procedure that parents want them that is medically accepted. Yes, but the medically accepted part is the crux here. So right now they're legally defended from doing them because it's medically accepted. But as soon as enough doctors start saying it's not medically accepted, then, and it's kind of like a catch-22. What's also interesting is that when like the AAP recommends circumcision, they don't cite medical reasons. They cite cultural and religious reasons. So it's this weird thing where the courts say, yes, parents can agree to do medical procedure, medically necessary procedures for their children. That's fine. That's within their rights as a parent. But then this is allowed because the AAP says it's okay. But the AAP says it's okay because they cite religious and cultural reasons. Wait, so foreskins are put into cosmetics? Not all foreskins, but yes. Locked in a room with Stefan or Kokesh for an hour. Kokesh, easy. That's easy. The main reason they pushed it is because they have to retroactively justify their bad behavior. I think that this is very largely true. You don't want to come out and say, even if there was no legal liability, you don't want to come out and admit you were doing something that was unnecessary or potentially wrong, even if you're not going to be sued. Psychologically, you just don't want to go there. So it makes more sense to just double down and be like, nope, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Do they specifically grow out their fingernails for the traditional Jewish circumcision? You would have to ask a moil. But I do think they have to be fairly long to work, so probably, yeah. If you have really short fingernails, you can't peel a baby foreskin off, I'm guessing. Having peeled back like adult foreskins, like I've used my thumb on adult foreskins that are already like the membrane's already gone. It could be tricky, and I can't imagine doing it to a baby. Like it would actually be really hard. Is that what Ben Shapiro did to his son? My guess is no, because typically the father doesn't do it to the son, a moil does it to the son. Now, if the father is a doctor and is a moil, then maybe the father would do it to his son. So, and one of the guys on the AAP, one of the guys who recommends circumcision be done, I think his name is Feldman or Friedman. He admits that he circumcised his own son on his dining room table, and he did it because of, quote, 3,000 years of history looking over his shoulder. So I don't know if he used his thumbnail though. He might have used because he's a doctor. He might have chosen to do it more sanitarily. But Ben Shapiro is a lawyer. He's not a physician. His wife is a doctor, but women are not involved in the. They can't be in the room when it happens. There's actually a lot of feminist Jews who find the whole thing really sexist. Did Ben Shapiro have a Moyle do that to his son? Very likely, yes. You could ask him, though. Yeah. Do you know what type 1 female circumcision is, and what do you have any idea onto why male circumcision is okay, but what type 1 FGM? So yeah, I think there's 4 types of the World Health Organization classifies 4 types of FGM, and type 1 I believe is like a ceremonial pinprick or scrape. So they're not removing any tissue, they're not removing the clitoral hood, the clitoris, the labia, or anything like that. They will do a pinprick or a little scrape, draw basically a ceremonial drop of blood. This procedure is extremely minor. If it's done in a medical, even if you did it in the wild, it's probably not that dangerous. But if you do it in a medical facility, the risk is it's the lowest risk you could possibly have. Physicians a month or a year later won't even be able to tell that it was done, so there'll be no change into the genitalia. They'll all be intact. There was just a pinprick, and there's people who say this shouldn't be allowed either because you're doing an unnecessary surgery, you're touching a knife to the genitals or whatnot. So yeah, type 1 female circumcision is much less invasive than male circumcision. Now type 4 female circumcision is much more invasive. You're talking about full infibulation, removal of all the external genitalia. It's a much bigger thing. And the reason is that there's a difference is completely cultural. In principle, there isn't really a difference. There's differences in degree, but again, type 1 female circumcision is less than male circumcision generally, and yet people would consider that worse just because it's female. So male genitalia are just much more disposable in this. But Kokesh has lost a lot of his luster, and he's been beaten down a lot because he's such a douchebag and a con artist and a piece of shit. But you know, he's not going to give up. Like, so I've seen him. He's started making more videos, and I think he's trying to do stuff. But I don't know how well he's doing. Maybe I'll see him at Porkfest. It wouldn't surprise me if he shows up, since that would be one of his chief recruiting grounds. Andrew Friedman, there you go. And apparently he is quite. He thinks that intactivists are quite powerful, and he's nervous about. But if you listen to Aaron Pendol or Eric Marotta, the maker of the American Circumcision documentary, he thinks that he thinks that they fundamentally do not understand the nature of this, because they look at it like, oh, these people are upset because they had a botched circumcision, or they're. But he goes, no, they don't understand that the intactivists see it as a human rights issue and as a moral question, and they're not going to stop. This is not going away, and I do feel like the culture on this is changing. I feel like there's been movement on this in the last just few months even. Why all the hate for Molyneux? Well, I have mixed feelings about Molyneux. I respect a lot of what he's done. He's a clearly intelligent guy, and he's been able to connect with a lot of people in a way that very few people can, right? He connects with way more people than I ever have, and so there's something to that. And he's an articulate guy, and you got to give someone credit. I'm going to become a YouTube philosopher, recording videos in his car, and a couple years later he's done it, and he's financially successful, and he's influential. Like, a lot of people listen to him. And so I will give him a lot of credit for that. But I also think that he has a lot of ego and vanity issues that just destroy his personality. Like, he has these deep-seated character flaws which greatly diminish him, unnecessarily too. And I think a lot of it, he's very insecure. He wants to be seen as super intelligent. He wants to be seen as the philosopher king. He has this very inflated view of himself, and it's made him disingenuous. So I think a big part of it was he doesn't have very many original ideas, and the original ideas that he has are pretty bad. They're not that good. And so he likes to take ideas that aren't really original and pawn them off as his own. So the example I always use is DROs, and he'll say, this is what first keyed me off that something was off. He did a call-in show, and somebody asked, well, how would anarchy work? And he said, oh, well, I invented this thing called DROs, and a DRO is a dispute resolution organization, and it's all, two people get in an argument, a theft or a crime, their DROs get together and they work it out, blah blah blah. Okay, that's a fine idea, but it's not original to Molyneux, right? Hans Hermann Hoppe talked about it. He called them insurance companies. The Tannenhills talked about it in The Market of Liberty way back in the 1970s, and Gustave de Molinari talked about it way back in The Private Production of Defense back in the 1880s. So this is not an original idea, and I'm not going to fault Molyneux for not coming up with a new idea, but he pawned it off as his own because he wants to be the great man, and he does this a lot. And the thing is, if his subscribers aren't that familiar with libertarian theory, they don't necessarily pick up that he's doing this. Uh, so, and I he's very manipulative. A lot of his debate tactics are awful. I think he actually is a misogynist, and that term gets thrown around way too much, but I think he actually is. Um, I think he's a hypocrite, right? He says he's all for free debate and stuff, but when people start to tear his stuff apart, he just blocks them or has them removed from the forums. Uh, this has been going on for a long time, whatever the issue is. Um, so no, and then he's a complete hypocrite now because he's changed his principles, right? So he was this this pro open borders libertarian anarchist, and now he's a Trump supporting Republican. He hates his mother, yeah, apparently, but then he venerates his father. It's really weird. Infibulation is reversible, and only the tip of the clitoris can ever be removed. No, they can remove the entire. Well, okay, fair enough, right? A lot of the clitoris is internal. I get that, but all the external clitoris can be removed. The clitoral hood can be removed. The labia can be removed. So, and even if you undo infibulation, it still can leave scars and stuff. So, I think that these are more invasive than standard male circumcision, which is not a justification for either. They're both abysmal and shouldn't be practiced. And they are the same in principle. I think all circumcision should be ended, but if boys are cut, then girls should also have their foreskins removed because it's the same thing. Yeah, well, we have this legal problem in the United States now where, under equal protection of the law, it makes no sense to say it can be done to boys, but it can't be done to girls, especially if you're talking about type 1. And this is what happens. It went to court. It's already gone to court, and the judges said that the federal law was unconstitutional. Now, state laws might still be okay, but you're going to. So you have these Muslim families where they want to do a ceremonial pinprick on their daughters, and that's a felony, and they can't do it. But they circumcise their sons, and that's totally fine. And the contradiction there is just too blatant. It was my troll army that got presidential candidate Andrew Yang to condemn circumcision. But he walked back on that immediately, right? He just basically said, I think it's a bad idea, but he wasn't talking about defunding. He wasn't talking about banning. I watched him on Ben Shapiro, and it was pretty pathetic. I mean, maybe it's a big step in the right direction to have somebody talking about it, but he walked that back immediately. He actually talked about what made him care about borders. Yeah, he became racist and said that Mexicans are a different species that reproduce differently. Your perspective is correct. The issue is picking up steam. It is now the point of circumcision is being discussed nonstop on men's rights Reddit. Yeah, and it's also my videos on foreskin restoration and circumcision get way more views than my videos on libertarianism, right? And that's they're much newer. They've had a lot shorter time, and they get constant video. They get constant stuff, and more people are talking it more and more. And I'm starting to see it get posted on Facebook, not by intactivists, not by people who are really into it, but other people. So I do think that there is a change, and we've just seen the rates have gone down, and there's going to be a tipping point because for a long time you could have this. There are so few men who were intact that you could just be like, well, this is the normal to be cut, and now it's going to be there are too many who are uncut, and when you see and you can tell it among the younger guys. When I see guys who are under 20 at the gym, they're much more likely to be intact than older ones. And some of those guys are going to go to medical school. Some of those guys are going they're going to date. They're going to have girlfriends. And the idea that foreskin is this dirty, worthless thing is going to slowly evaporate as they percolate through society. And by slowly, I mean like every year. Like, I'm thinking about one right now. He's a senior. He's going to be a freshman in college next year. And there's already been a couple cohorts before him. So, like, some of these guys with the reduced rates, they're already in medical school right now. Yeah, Yang crumbled. He completely crumbled. I th- but you almost, especially with Shapiro right there, the allegation is immediately going to be you're anti-Semitic. That's going to be the immediate claim, you're anti-Semitic, and that's like the death touch. So he backed right down. You know, I guess it was nice that he said foreskin's okay and my sons are intact, so that's a plus. But he backed down. And you know what? I think that Shapiro, because he's so dedicated to principle, right, could be just eviscerated on this. Because every argument for circumcision involves special pleading to why, oh, it's religious, so you can do it. Okay, then you can do it to girls, right? Oh no, what? So I think that Shapiro could really be pushed on this quite easily, but I think he just takes it for granted and he doesn't want to get into it. Told a 5-year-old Canadians were born out of snow. The mother was not pleased. She said 5-year-olds would believe me. I was like, that's why I said it. Okay, I don't know where this story's coming from. Came across a foreskin thread on 4chan. Someone linked your videos. Lol. Uh-oh. After the Charlie Hebdo attack, Molyneux said he had been to France 10 years prior and that he warned about Islam, so he didn't just change his mind, he lied about previous beliefs. Yeah, and then of course we can't forget the DMCA claim, right? So he was always on record that intellectual property is not a thing, there's no such thing as intellectual property, and then when a video comes out showing clips of him saying the most ridiculous things, he takes out a DMCA claim and then says, oh no, I was to stop bullying. I think he burned a lot of bridges in the libertarian world right as he was getting more popular with the alt-right. And so I think that was what was making him popular. That was what was making him money. That was why he was getting invited to speak places. And so he just switched. It was a bigger pool. Molyneux regularly promotes the statistics of Jewish intelligence. He also claims to be part Jewish, so he's just touting his own horn, right? He loves to say how smart he is and how his father was a professor and blah, 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 blah. What of my videos was on 4chan, and what were people saying about it? So I think I'm often accused of being like a goy apologist because I'm unapologetic about reading a lot of Jews and listening to a lot of Jews. And again, some of the best books against circumcision are by Jews. Circumcision: The Hidden Trauma by Ron Goldman. Marked in Your Flesh is by Edward Glick or Leonard Glick. So I don't think Maroda's Jewish, and Brian Earp is not Jewish either. But and really, the best book about circumcision is Robert Darby's The Surgical Temptation, and I don't think he's Jewish, but they've really kind of led the fight on this in a lot of ways. Okay, I said I was going to go to bed like an hour ago, and then we got a whole bunch of questions. All right, any more? Last call. Last call. Going once. Going twice. Sold. All right, guys. Well, it's been fun as usual, and I don't drink. Ever. Can't answer that. So, all right, guys. I got jujitsu in the morning, so I got to go to bed. But have a good one.